Chapter 1938. Immediately send a message to our men near the inn. Tell them to bring their weapons to the inn immediately. After Zhao Tian returned to the heavenly guest room, he could already vaguely hear the sound of horse hooves coming from the east street. At this moment, he called over a subordinate and instructed him. He did not know the exact name of the subordinate, because he had too many subordinates. Xin Yi, Sky Eagle, and the others had all taken away experts. The 10 people left by his side were the weakest among them, so he naturally did not remember their names. Zhao Tian had planted a total of 200 people in Sourcepeak City. Xian Yi had taken away 110 people, and he had left 10 people with him. In the houses near Tong Fu Inn, there were still 80 or so of his men. Previously, due to the urgency of time, Zhao Tian did not wait for everyone to arrive before giving the order to attack the post house. But now, since he had chosen to use himself as bait and guard the inn, then these people naturally had to be called over. After all, if the cavalry coming from the east was weak, Zhao Tian was confident that he could take them down with these people. If the opponent was strong, it did not matter even if he lost, because his goal of restraining the opponent would have been achieved. Yes, guard master. That person cupped his fist respectfully to Zhao Tian, then turned around and left. If you want to put on a show, you have to do it all the way. The few of you, wait in the room next door. If this cavalry comes straight for my room after entering the inn, then find an opportunity to kill your way out. Zhao Tian instructed the other 9 people. Yes, everyone cupped their fists and accepted the order. Then, they turned around and went out to the earth-ranked guest room next door. Bang, bang, bang. Not long after this series of arrangements was completed, Zhao Tian heard the door of the inn being directly knocked open from the outside, emitting a few loud bangs. Almost all of the sleeping guests in the inn were woken up, and some with bad tempers couldn't help but curse loudly. Who the F***CK is this? Why aren't you sleeping at night? What are you knocking on the door for? What is the innkeeper doing? Who the F***CK is knocking on the door in the middle of the night? Which bastard is it? Why don't you try hitting me again? In the midst of the scattered curses, many rooms that were originally in darkness lit up one after another. Then, a crowd of people could be seen moving about. Obviously, those were the guests who had been woken up. They came out of their rooms to see what was happening outside. With just one look, the people who were cursing earlier immediately shut their mouths. More than 10 men with weapons in their hands were standing in the hall with murderous looks on their faces. Although there were only a dozen of them, they gave off the aura of hundreds and thousands of people. Aura was a mysterious thing, but it did exist. A general who had been through hundreds of battles and a new recruit who had just joined the army would definitely give off a different feeling when they stood in front of each other. The 100 Cavalry was the most mysterious and elite force of the Great Tang. Each of its soldiers was an elite, and as the commander of the 100 Cavalry, Li Juanxian's strength was even greater. Amongst all the Tang generals, he could be considered one of the strongest. This group of elites, standing in front of the crowd, naturally exerted an invisible pressure on them. Although the Tang revered martial arts, and many of their refined guests carried sabers and swords with them. For Li Juanxian and his men to charge into an inn with weapons in the middle of the night clearly meant that they had come with ill intentions. If not for the fact that they were all dressed rather neatly and had no bandit faces like One-Eyed Man or Scarred Face on them, the guests would have thought that they were bandits. Even if they weren't bandits, Li Juanxian's group still gave off the impression that they were not to be trifled with. Thus, those guests who had been about to come out of their rooms and curse when they saw Li Juanxian's group swallowed their words and dejectedly returned to their rooms. It wasn't that they were cowards, but that Li Juanxian's group was simply too powerful. Anyone who dared to provoke them would have to have been kicked in the head by a donkey. In truth, Li Juanxian didn't think much of these guests. Ever since he had entered the inn, his eyes had never once paused on them. His head was raised as he scanned the small wooden plates above the doors of each room on the second floor, recording the room number of each room. As the largest inn in Taiyuan City, Tongfu Inn had divided its rooms into heaven, earth, human, and common. There was only one heaven room, but it was so expensive that ordinary people couldn't afford it. The lower the level of the rooms, the more there were, and correspondingly, the cheaper each night. Thus, Li Junxian only needed to find the heaven character on the wooden plates in front of each room. Over there, Li Junxian's eyes focused as he pointed at the westernmost room and sternly said, Chun Fu, Shun Tu, the two of you guard the front and back doors of the inn. The rest of you, follow me upstairs. Yes. Everyone bowed and received their orders. Two of them went to the front door and the back door of the inn, while Li Junxian led the rest of them up the stairs to the heaven guest room on the west side. There's no need to knock. Just open the door. One of the 100 horsemen was just about to knock on the door when Li Junxian stopped him. As the saying went, delay could lead to change, and he did not want any changes. After saying this, he walked past the 100 horsemen and kicked open the door. In truth, the door wasn't locked. The moment the door was kicked open, Li Junxian's group rushed in and saw an ordinary-looking middle-aged man casually drinking tea at the tea table in the center of the room. The middle-aged man was taken aback by the intrusion of Li Junxian's group, and then he frowned. Who are you? Why have you barged into this one's room? Li Junxian frowned when he saw that there was only one person in the room, a seemingly refined middle-aged man who didn't seem to know any martial arts. He began to wonder if his previous judgment had been wrong, but since he was here, he had to get to the bottom of this matter. He signaled the people around him with his eyes, and several of the riders went to guard the door and the windows to prevent the middle-aged man from escaping. Li Junxian sat down across from the middle-aged man and stared at him. Instead of answering his question, he asked why. There's no need for you to know who we are. First, tell me who you are. Where did you come from? Why have you come to Taiyuan City? The middle-aged man scowled in displeasure and coldly snorted. Oomph. Good sir has barged into someone else's room in the middle of the night. It's fine if you don't give an explanation, but now you're questioning me? Truly tyrannical. Do you really think there's no law in Taiyuan City? Li Junxian couldn't be bothered to waste words with him, so he bluntly said, Don't waste words with me. I'll give you one more chance. If you can't clearly explain your background, we'll arrest you and send you to the authorities. Once we're there, we'll slowly talk to you about the law. Arrest me? This one has not committed any crime, nor has he stolen or robbed. What right do you have to arrest me? The middle-aged man coldly sneered. Li Junxian chuckled. Huh, you're not going to speak? Come, arrest him and send him to the provincial governor's residence for interrogation. Although he couldn't be sure of the middle-aged man's exact identity, since he was connected to the Wang clan's second branch, and on the way to the inn, Li Junxian had learned that Wang Kuei had fled for fear of punishment. This meant that the Wang clan's second branch truly had colluded with Turkic spies. Since this middle-aged man had secretly met with Wang Xinyuan, this meant that he was in cahoots with Zhao Diyan. At the very least, he was someone Zhao Diyan had sent to liaise with the Wang clan's second branch. After saying this, Li Junxian got up and prepared to leave. The two horsemen at his side began to approach the middle-aged man, clearly intending to capture him. A hint of panic flitted across the middle-aged man's face, and he hurriedly said, Are you from the authorities? Fine, I'll speak. This one is Yu Dexing, a native of Yinzhou. I came to Taiyuan to buy some goods. Once I'm done, I'll return. A merchant of Yinzhou. A playful smile appeared on Li Junxian's face as he indifferently asked, Then do you have a talisman scroll? A talisman scroll was equivalent to a modern letter of introduction. In ancient times, one needed an identity card to stay in an inn. However, this identity card was not the same as the modern one, but something similar to a letter of introduction. Although ancient China did not have an information system to manage household registers, it had a complete household register system long ago. In order to distinguish between people, the ancients had invented travel permits, door tickets, fish tokens, and tooth tokens to prove one's identity. The majority of ancient China rarely had the opportunity to travel, and only a few people had the need for such things. If an official or merchant was on a business trip or engaged in an official foreign activity, they would have a talisman scroll or a talisman scroll. These talismans, sections, and scrolls were all proof of identity for staying in an inn in the early days. They were equivalent to modern letters of introduction. Later on, courier scrolls and letter tokens were also proof of travel. Without a proof of travel, it was impossible to stay in an inn, especially one run by an official. In the Tang Dynasty, officials of rank 5 and above had a fish token issued by the imperial court to prove their identity. If an ordinary person wanted to travel, they had to report it to the prefect inspector or fangzheng. The prefect inspector or fangzheng would then report it to the local yamen, and the prefect or secretary would issue a talisman scroll, letter of introduction, upon approval. In truth, the travel permits of the Ming Dynasty were similar to these things. I do. The middle-aged man seemed to believe that Li Junxian was an official. He nodded and then took out a yellowed paper from his bosom and placed it on the table. Li Junxian took it and began to carefully examine it. A few moments later, Li Junxian put down the paper and smiled at the middle-aged man. This talisman scroll is forged so well that it looks almost real. If this general hadn't seen the talisman scroll from Yunzhou, you really might have fooled me. Come, seize this man. The middle-aged man grimaced and immediately backed away, harshly saying, "My talisman scroll really can't be any more real. Good sir is deliberately making things difficult for a deer as a horse. Just what are your intentions? Do you really think that this you is easy to bully?" After saying this, he picked up the teacup on the table and smashed it to the ground. At the same time, there was a rush of footsteps outside the door, and then a group of people charged in, sabers and swords in hand. At a glance, there were 20 to 30 people. It was clear that some of the reinforcements Zhao Dian had sent earlier had already arrived at the inn. Chapter 1939. Finally willing to reveal your true face? In the heavenly guest room of Tongfu, in Taiyuan City, Li Junxian showed no fear in the face of these menacing 20 to 30 men. On the contrary, he would have found it strange if this middle-aged man had no helpers. The more subordinates he had, the higher his status on Zhao Dian's side. There was even a chance that he was Zhao Dian himself. The middle-aged man was now standing close to the door, and the 20 to 30 people who had broken in with their sabers and swords had automatically moved to the left and right of the middle-aged man. The two sides were now in a standoff. The middle-aged man looked at Li Junxian and said, "Since good sir insists on pestering this you endlessly, don't blame this you for being impolite." After he finished speaking, he looked at the guards beside him and said, "When going out to do business, it's inevitable to encounter some bandits. For the sake of safety, this you specially hired some guards. If your excellency is from the government, then please reveal your identity. If your excellency is here to make things difficult for this you, then these guards of mine won't show you any mercy." A hint of derision appeared on Li Junxian's face. "Reveal my identity? You still don't have the right to know who I am. In my view, you should stop pretending. If you didn't have firm evidence, I wouldn't have personally led my men here. Tell me, what is your true identity? Where is your leader?" Zhao Dian. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed. He had clearly not expected Li Junxian to know his identity. After all, ever since he had infiltrated Taiyuan City, he had been operating in secret. Other than Wang Kuei and Wang Xingyuan, he had never revealed his identity to anyone else. So how did Li Junxian know his name? He had no idea that the secret letter he had sent to the steppe this morning had already been intercepted by Han Lijing and brought to Taiyuan City. What leader? This one doesn't know what you're talking about. Come, see the guests out. The middle-aged man was only a few moments stunned before he ordered his men. "Please leave. My master does not welcome you." Two saber-wielding soldiers stepped forward and sternly barked at Li Junxian's group. Could you be Zhao Dian? Very good." Li Junxian had noticed the expression on the middle-aged man's face, and he couldn't help but think of a possibility. Thus, he decisively ordered the 100-some cavalry in the room, "Capture him." "Yes." The 8 horsemen in the house answered loudly. Then, a series of clanging sounds could be heard. The horsemen drew their weapons and charged at the middle-aged man. "You are courting death." The leader of the guards beside the middle-aged man snorted coldly. He was not afraid at all and led a few people to greet them. As the weapons clashed, the room was suddenly filled with the sound of ding, ding, pong, pong. In terms of numbers, Li Juanxian's side had no advantage in a battle of 8 against 30, but the 100-some cavalry were the most elite soldiers of the Great Tang, and each one of them was a top-notch expert. In terms of individual strength, the 100-some cavalry had the advantage. In addition, there was limited space in the room, and with so many people, it was very difficult to move freely. If this had been an open area outside the room, the middle-aged man's side would have been able to use their numbers to pincer him. But there's only so much space in the room, and the 30-some of them had basically filled the room. And this was only because the middle-aged man was staying in the most expensive room of Tongfu Inn, the Heaven Room. Compared to the other rooms, this room was not only luxuriously decorated, but it was also large enough. If they had been staying in a shared room, it would have been a problem for them to even squeeze in. Thus, even though they had the advantage in numbers, the middle-aged man's side had not been able to gain much of an advantage. On the contrary, after a few rounds, several of them had been stabbed in the vitals and dropped to the ground. The middle-aged man stood motionless in the doorway, 2 guards on his left and right. Li Juanxian also did not move. He was coldly watching the middle-aged man to prevent him from escaping. As for the battle, he was not very worried. Although the 100-some cavalry were not strong enough to fight against 10 or 100, he was confident that his men would be able to deal with an enemy 3 times their size. Sure enough, after the 2 sides fought for more than 10 rounds, the middle-aged man's side was already showing signs of defeat. There were more than 10 people lying on the ground. The 2 guards beside the middle-aged man said in a low voice, Master, we will escort you to retreat first." In his panic, this fellow had almost let his tongue slip. Li Juanxian's sharp ears had picked up on this small slip of the tongue in the chaos, and his eyes brightened. This middle-aged man really was a big fish, and there was a high chance that he was Zhao Tian himself. Thus, Li Juanxian wasted no more time. As the saying went, to capture bandits, capture the leader first. He blinked up to the middle-aged man and sneered. "Oomph. You want to escape? You won't be able to escape tonight." As he spoke, Li Juanxian reached out with his hand to grab the middle-aged man's shoulder. The middle-aged man hastily backed away, but he was far slower than the Grandmaster Li Juanxian. As Li Juanxian's hand got closer and closer, a hint of panic appeared in his eyes. At this moment, the 2 guards at his side attacked. 2 sabers slashed at Li Juanxian's arm. If Li Juanxian continued forward, he would have been able to grab the middle-aged man before the sabers fell. But once he did, he would not have the time to pull back his arm. Although Li Juanxian was a powerful martial artist, he was far from being invulnerable. How could a body of flesh and blood stand against sharp sabers? Thus, Li Juanxian chose to retreat for now. At the same time, he unsheathed his sword and brazenly charged at the 2 guards at the middle-aged man's side. Clang-clang, saber and sword clashed. These 2 were only at the Qi transformation realm, so how could they possibly contend against Li Juanxian, who had already reached the Grandmaster realm? In just 2 or 3 moves, Li Juanxian had found a small flaw in their saber techniques. Once the time was right, he cut their throats with a single slash. While he was fighting with the 2 guards, the middle-aged man was hastily backing away. As the 2 guards fell, clutching their necks, the middle-aged man hastily turned around and ran out of the room. Too powerful. Li Juanxian gave him the feeling that he was simply too powerful. Although Xian Yu was also a Grandmaster, he was still lacking compared to Li Juanxian. In just 2 or 3 moves, he had killed 2 Qi transformation experts. Even if all the 30-some people in the room had attacked together, they probably wouldn't have been able to do anything to Li Juanxian. Li Juanxian sneered as he saw the middle-aged man fleeing faster than a rabbit. With a tap of his foot, the middle-aged man felt a gust of wind, and then he saw Li Juanxian standing in front of him. "You still want to run? I already said that you won't be going anywhere today. Obediently come back with me," Li Juanxian indifferently said. A hint of panic flitted across the middle-aged man's face. Suddenly, he heard hurried footsteps outside the inn. A smile appeared on the middle-aged man's lips as he turned to look at the entrance, and then said to Li Juanxian, "Run? This god never said anything about running. No matter who you are, all of you will die here today. Li Junxian followed the middle-aged man's gaze and saw that 50 to 60 armed warriors had entered the entrance of the inn. Cough, cough, of course, not all of them were wielding weapons. If one looked carefully, one could see that some of them were unarmed. Chun Fu, who had been assigned by Li Junxian to guard the entrance of the inn, had been forced to retreat into the hall on the first floor of the inn by these 50 to 60 warriors. He was not a grandmaster like Li Junxian, so it was only natural for him to feel uneasy in the face of so many people. Shin Tu, who had been guarding the back gate, had hurried over when he heard the commotion at the front gate, but the two of them were still useless against 50 to 60 people. Li Junxian finally understood why the middle-aged man had suddenly become so confident. These 50 to 60 people and the 30-some in the room made for a total of 80 to 90 people. But the 100 horsemen only had 10 people. This made the situation even more difficult to deal with. But Li Junxian was not afraid. On the contrary, he was rather excited. The more people that came to the middle-aged man's rescue, the higher his status. At this moment, he was almost certain that this middle-aged man was Zhao Dian. I didn't think that you would have so many subordinates. It seems like you're Zhao Dian. Upon seeing the situation, Li Junxian showed no signs of nervousness. He looked at the middle-aged man and chuckled. Seeing that the situation was settled, the middle-aged man no longer put on an act. He neither admitted nor denied it, but asked, "Just who are you? How did you know of this god's identity?" Although the middle-aged man did not directly admit it, his words were basically a tacit admission that he was Zhao Dian. Li Junxian turned serious and indifferently said, "Remember, the one who captured you today is Li Junxian of the Great Tang's 100 cavalry. As for how this general knew of your identity, you will understand once you follow this general to the Yamen." 100 cavalry? Li Junxian, you're actually Li Junxian? Zhao Dian was flabbergasted by Li Junxian's report of his identity. Not even with Kongming's wisdom could he have predicted that the 100 cavalry commander of Chang would suddenly appear in Taiyuan City. In this case, it was no surprise that his identity had been exposed. After all, few people in the world could compare to the 100 horsemen's ability to gather information. So that's how it is. No wonder shopkeeper's son suddenly disappeared. No wonder you were able to find this place. However, this god came to Taiyuan and managed to take down the 100 cavalry commander of the Great Tang. That's not a loss. Zhao Dian turned to Li Junxian and sneered. Take down? Do you think that victory is already in your grasp? Li Junxian jeered. Do you think they're faster, or this general is faster? As he spoke, Li Junxian vanished. A moment later, he appeared at Zhao Dian's side, one hand clamping down on Zhao Dian's shoulder while the other clamped down on Zhao Dian's neck. The warriors in the hall had no time to react, only enough time to shout, "Brother Li, you're in the middle of nowhere. Lord Guard, release Lord Guard." Chapter 1940. Qingke, why haven't you gone to bed yet? In Taiyuan Post Station, Iron Egg's room, Iron Egg couldn't help but ask when he saw Li Tai come in. It was almost 8 o'clock in the evening in modern times. Most people had already eaten dinner and gone to bed. In the post station, other than the Imperial Guards on night patrol and Han Lijun and the others who went to Wang Kuei's manor near Longshan, the rest of the people had already returned to their rooms after dinner. It can't be helped. The ancient people's biological clocks were like this. Iron Egg was sitting at the table and reading a book. This was the mathematics textbook for the next semester of Yanwang College. Li Zixuan had already compiled it before he entered the military camp, but it hadn't been printed on a large scale yet. After all, Li Zixuan was his brother-in-law, so Li Zixuan had opened a back door for Iron Egg in this regard. "I can't sleep." Li Tai walked in and sat across from Iron Egg without hesitation. When he saw the book in Iron Egg's hands, he couldn't help but mutter, "Iron Egg, you're not being kind. Everyone is busy working for the telegraph relay station, but you're the only one enjoying this special treatment from the Yamacho. This is unfair competition." Speaking up to this point, Little Fatty's face was full of indignation. That look was a bit like a modern school sports meet, where students were all participating in the sports meet on the field, but someone discovered that a student was secretly studying in the classroom. Iron Egg put down the book in his hand and said with a speechless face, "What unfair competition. Master gave me the mathematics textbook for the next semester. It's not like you haven't read it before." It wasn't a secret that he had the mathematics textbook for the next semester. At least, Li Tai, Meng Wenhao, and Qin Huayu already knew about it. Moreover, they had borrowed it from Iron Egg before, and Iron Egg had never rejected it. The world seems to be stable now, but I always feel that it will soon enter an eventful period. As a student of Yanhuang College, I have to follow my master's wishes and establish a heart for the world, a life for the people, and a life for the past. In the second half of the year, when the war between the Tang Empire and the Turks starts, Yanhuang College will definitely not be able to stay out of it. At that time, we might have to run around like we are now. Therefore, I want to use the time every night to prepare for the next semester's classes in advance to avoid falling behind in my studies. Iron Egg suddenly sighed and said softly as he closed the book and placed it on the table. Just as he said, when Li Zishuan founded Yanhuang College, he hoped to cultivate a group of people who were truly useful to the country and the people, not bookworms who only knew how to study. Therefore, whether it was the Battle of Guan City in April, the killing of locusts in June, or the establishment of telegraph relay stations in Taiyuan and Yinzhou, all of these events more or less had the shadow of Yanhuang College's students. As the first batch of students of Yanhuang College, and, as Li Zishuan believed, they were the golden generation of Yanhuang College. Iron Egg, Li Tai, and Li Ke's cohort of students had high hopes for Li Zishuan. Li Zishuan hoped that not only could they study well in the academy, but that in the process, if the country needed them, the students of the academy had to be there for them. If the Tang Empire's golden age wanted to last forever, it needed too many people who could serve the country. This was the main reason why Li Zishuan risked universal condemnation to establish the engineering school and Yanhuang College. Chapter 1941. Taiyuan was a large city in the north, so the Taiyuan post house wasn't small at all. There were a total of 28 individual buildings in the post house, and each building had a few to over 20 guest rooms. In the dark night, 8 Imperial Army soldiers stood on the roofs of the buildings in the east, west, south, north, southeast, southwest, northeast, and northwest of the courier station. Using the weak light from the stone lanterns in the courtyards of the courier station, the 8 Imperial Army soldiers stood on high points and meticulously scanned the entire courier station. Below them, there would be a group of soldiers patrolling with torches every once in a while. Although Dugu Xian didn't expect Zhao Diyin to send people to attack the post house tonight, the defense of the post house didn't relax because of this. There were both open and hidden sentries. If an unknown person broke into the post house, these Imperial Army soldiers on night duty would be able to immediately discover it and issue a warning. This was the Imperial Army. No matter when or where, they wouldn't abandon their superb military discipline. Whoosh! In the night, a thin needle with a cold glow flew straight toward the Imperial Army soldier on the east side of the building. It wasn't daytime, and there was no moon tonight. The Imperial Army soldier on the roof naturally couldn't see this thin needle. However, when the thin needle was about to reach him, he could still feel the turbulence in the air. But at this time, it was already too late for him to dodge. The thin needle silently pierced through the Imperial Army soldier's throat without any reservation. He didn't even have time to make a sound before he clutched his throat and fell straight to the ground. Based on the way he fell, when he hit the ground, he would definitely make a sound and attract the attention of the other troops. But at this moment, a black shadow flew over. Before the Imperial Army soldier fell, he caught the latter's body and gently placed him on the roof. As there was only a faint light in the courtyard and no light on the roof, the fall of this Imperial Army soldier didn't attract the attention of the hidden sentries at the southeast and northeast corners that were closest to him. After putting down the Imperial Army soldier's body, the black shadow didn't stop and headed straight for the hidden sentries at the southeast corner. Whoosh! Whoosh! Using the same method, The Black Shadow quietly eliminated the 3 hidden sentries that the Imperial Army had placed in the southeast, east, and southwest of the post house in less than 15 minutes. At this point, all the hidden sentries in the east of the post house had been eliminated by the Black Shadow. It had to be said that this shadow's strength was indeed formidable. The Black Shadow flew to the east wall of the post house. Below the wall, there were actually more than 100 people hiding. The Black Shadow said to the people below in a low voice, "The hidden sentries on the east side of the post house have been eliminated. Follow the plan." "Yes," everyone responded in a low voice. Then, a dozen or so Black Shadows rushed to the front and back doors of the post house, while the other 90 or so Black Shadows leaped over the wall and entered the post house. The Black Shadow flew to the east wall of the post house. Below the wall, there were actually more than 100 people hiding. The Black Shadow said to the people below in a low voice, "The hidden sentries on the east side of the post house have been eliminated. Follow the plan." "Yes," everyone responded in a low voice. Then, a dozen or so Black Shadows rushed to the front and back doors of the post house, while the other 90 or so Black Shadows leaped over the wall and entered the post house. A dozen or so Black Shadows rushed to the front and back doors of the post house, while the other 90 or so Black Shadows leaped over the wall and entered the post house. Chapter 1942. What's going on outside? Outside the room, Dugu Xin called over the guard at the door and asked in a low voice, "General, there's a warning from our brothers at the east of the post house." General, who has already led his men there. The guard at the door cupped his fists and replied, "I'll go and take a look." Dugu Xion's expression turned grim. "Wang Tong, Guojian, the 2 of you stay here to ensure His Highness' safety. If the situation turns bad, immediately evacuate with His Highness." The 2 of them looked at each other, then cupped their fists and said in unison, "General, we'll go with you." They were Dugu Xion's personal guards. Naturally, wherever Dugu Xion went, they would follow. Dugu Xion's expression was cold as he said sternly, "This is a military order. Do the 2 of you dare to disobey a military order?" Seeing Dugu Xion's anger, Wang Tong and Guojian lowered their heads, not daring to say another word. Dugu Xion tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. This was the sword that had accompanied him in battle for many years, and it had never left his side. However, he had been seriously injured this time and had almost died. Because of the severity of his injuries and the doctor's warning that he could not use martial arts for the time being, his sword had been removed by Dugu Feng and placed on the sword rack. When he heard the sound of an enemy attack from outside, Dugu Xion had not hesitated and had come out with his sword. As the leader of this army, there was no reason for him to be a coward in the face of a great enemy. "I'll leave this place to the 2 of you. Remember, even if the 2 of you lose your lives, you must ensure His Highness' safety." Dugu Xion said in a low voice as he patted Wang Tong's shoulder, then left with his sword. His tone was no longer as stern as before. It was just that his back looked a little tragic and desolate. Dugu Xion had a strong premonition that the enemy tonight was no ordinary person. The guess that Li Tai had mentioned to him earlier might very well be true. Zhao Dian had really gathered all his men to launch a sneak attack on the post house. "Yes, General." The 2 personal guards felt a little sour in their noses as they looked at Dugu Xion's bleak back and cupped their fists. The location of the incident was actually very close to Dugu Xion's room. It didn't take long for Dugu Xion to arrive at the scene. At that moment, the Imperial Army and a group of unidentified men in black were already engaged in battle. There were many scattered torches on the ground, which meant that they had already lost a lot of men. Only the Imperial Army would carry torches. The people who came to ambush the post house definitely wouldn't have brought their own torches. With the light from the scattered torches on the ground and the stone lanterns in the courtyard, Dugu Xion was able to make out the situation. The other side had around 100 men, while the Imperial Army had more than 200. While it seemed like they had the advantage in numbers, the Imperial Army had no advantage in the overall situation. Among the group of black-clothed men, There was a thin and slightly shorter man who was constantly flying through the crowd. Every time he waved his sleeve, there would be a few flashes of silver light. Then, a few Imperial Army soldiers would be killed by those flashes of silver light. He was truly a harvester of human lives. It was as if he had entered a realm where no one could stop him. It's him. Dugu Exin narrowed his eyes. Although the man was dressed in black and had his face covered, Dugu Exin still recognized him at a glance. It was the masked assassin who had severely injured him in the southern part of the city this morning. The hidden weapons used by the two of them were exactly the same, as well as the way they used them. In the entire Taiyuan city, there was probably no other person who could use hidden weapons to such an extent. Seeing this, Dugu Exin quickly stepped forward, wanting to join the battle. Although he had not yet recovered from his serious injuries, and although Gong Sun Liang had warned him not to use force for 7 days, he couldn't just stand by and watch his men get slaughtered in front of him. Not only was there a martial arts master on the other side, but the strength of the rest was also not low. Dugu Exin could clearly see that among the more than 100 men, there were at least 6 or 7 martial arts masters at the peak of the Qi transformation realm. There were nearly a dozen martial arts masters at the late stage of the Qi transformation realm. Although these people were fighting individually on the battlefield without any cooperation, the Imperial Army soldiers without a commander had already been beaten into a daze. There was no need for them to cooperate in battle. The main reason was that Xianye's individual strength was too strong. As the only martial arts master on the battlefield, he was like a living king of hell. If he wanted to take someone's life, that person would fall in the next moment. Such tyrannical strength was completely terrifying. Although the Imperial Army soldiers had undergone a long period of training and were not afraid of death, none of them wanted to die in such a humiliating manner. Therefore, under such circumstances, Dugu Exin had no choice but to take the field himself. General, the Imperial Army soldiers at the back were the first to notice Dugu Exin. At first, they were surprised. After all, they had more or less heard about Dugu Exin's injuries. After the surprise, they were ecstatic. A large part of the reason why the Imperial Army was being suppressed and thrown into disarray was because they did not have a commander on their side who could match the top martial arts masters of the enemy. In other words, they did not have a backbone. With Dugu Exin's appearance, this problem was easily solved. This was because in the eyes of the Imperial Army, Dugu Exin was an invincible existence. Even if he had not recovered from his injuries, he was still the spiritual faith of the Imperial Army. Nodding slightly at the Imperial Army soldiers, Dugu Exin quickly walked into the ranks. Circulating qi in his dantian, Dugu Exin roared, "Generals, listen up. Set up the formation. Goose formation." This was a roar that contained qi. At this time, although the courier station was filled with battle cries, Dugu Exin's roar still clearly reached the ears of every Imperial Army soldier. In the morning, he had been severely injured by Xianyi and had almost died. After a day of recuperation, although Gong Sun Liang had ordered him not to fight, this did not mean that he did not have the ability to fight. In truth, after a day of recuperation, Dugu Exin had recovered about 50% of his qi, and he was now able to fight against Xianyi. But after this battle, he was likely to be even more injured. At best, his cultivation would be damaged, and at worst, he would lose his life. Dugu Exin naturally understood the consequences, but with the enemy before them and Li Tai's safety threatened, he could no longer care so much. He had to fight and buy time for Li Tai to retreat. "Yes, sir." A loud roar instantly woke up the Imperial Army from their stupor. This battle-hardened army immediately had a backbone. The 200 or so Imperial Army soldiers responded loudly. Immediately after, the Imperial Army soldiers that were fighting with Xianyi and the others quickly broke away from the battle. Then, according to the formation that they had been trained in, they quickly split into 3 rows. The left and right wings were arranged in an echelon formation, forming an inverted V shape. This was the goose formation. The tip of the inverted V was where the strongest fighting force of the Imperial Army was gathered. Dugu Exin was naturally in the middle. In this way, Not only could he protect the two flanks and the rear, he could also prevent the enemy from circling around. Facing this group of martial arts experts, Dugu Xin wanted to use the goose formation to defend the east side of the courier station. On one hand, he could prevent the enemy's top experts from slaughtering his own soldiers. On the other hand, he could quickly stabilize the situation and buy time for Li Tai's safe retreat. Otherwise, if any of these martial arts experts went around them to find Li Tai, it would be a great threat to Li Tai and Iron Egg. However, he did not know that before he came, someone had already gone around the Imperial Army to find Li Tai. Seeing the Imperial Army get into a battle formation under the command of a young general, the leader of the men in black could not help but frown. This was because he knew that fighting alone was the strength of this group of people, and cooperation in battle formations was the strength of the Imperial Army. Once the Imperial Army got into formation, it would not be easy for them to slaughter the Imperial Army as they had before. The situation of the battle could very well be reversed. After seeing the young general's appearance, the leader of the men in black could not help but sneer. Dugu Xin? Still want to resist stubbornly? I wonder how much strength you have now. From a voice, who else could this leader be but Xian Yi, who had tried to assassinate Dugu Xin in the morning? You'll know how much strength I have after you try. Dugu Xion's face was flushed. It seemed that he had recovered to his peak condition. He answered Xian Yi indifferently, then raised his sword to the sky and ordered loudly, "Kill! Kill! Kill! Kill!" The 200 Imperial Army soldiers had been suppressed for a long time, and their stomachs were already filled with anger. Dugu Xion's shout of "kill" completely ignited the flames of vengeance in their hearts. The Imperial Army soldiers all responded loudly, and under Dugu Xion's lead, they charged toward the group of men in black with weapons in hand. In an instant, their momentum was like a rainbow. Dugu Xion's calm and confident tone made Xian Yi feel a little uneasy. For a moment, he couldn't help but start to doubt the poison he had concocted. According to common sense, once his weapon or hidden weapon scratched the enemy, even if the enemy didn't die immediately, they would die within 2 hours of the poison acting up. Dugu Xian had been poisoned by several weapons in the morning, but not only was he completely fine, he was even able to wield his sword. This did not make sense. Could it be that his strength has really recovered completely? But how is that possible? Xian Yi could not help but think to himself. The reason why more than 100 of them had dared to attack the post house tonight was that they had concluded that Dugu Xian had not yet recovered from his injuries and that his strength was less than 10%. If Dugu Xian had really recovered completely, then their surprise attack tonight would have no chance of success. Xian Yi's heart was in a mess at this moment. Kill. Although Xian Yi had thought so much, it was only a matter of a moment. Seeing Dugu Xian leading the Imperial Army to attack, Xian Yi felt a little uneasy, but he did not show any weakness on the surface. He waved behind him and shouted the word "kill," then led the charge toward the Imperial Army. To be precise, he was charging toward Dugu Xian. To capture the thief, one must first capture the king. This was a decisive battle between kings and kings. Chapter 1943. Reporting. Night. Grasslands. Tujue Royal Court. In the evening, the Grassland coalition of 10 tribes launched a fierce offensive against Tuli, causing Tuli to suffer disastrous losses. After Xieli received the battle report, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. He specially set up a banquet in the royal court to entertain the 10 tribal chiefs. At this time, the banquet had already ended for quite some time. Xieli was just about to rest when he heard a series of urgent shouts coming from outside the tent. Xieli couldn't help but frown and said, "Come in." Although he didn't like to be disturbed when he was sleeping, Xieli knew in his heart that the soldiers outside the tent dared to come to him at this time. They definitely had urgent military information to report to him. The curtain was lifted. A soldier dressed as a Tujue, but his face looked like a Han, quickly walked in. The soldier came to Xieli's front. His hands tightly clenched a slip of paper. He bowed to Xieli and saluted. Reporting to Khan, Guard Lord sent urgent information from Tai Yuan. Khan, Please take a look." Finished speaking, he raised the letter in his hands above his head. The soldier's respectful attitude and thorough etiquette made Shelley's heart feel very comfortable. His anger from being disturbed from his rest earlier immediately dissipated a little. Speaking of which, the reason why he wanted to plot against the Central Plains, other than the rich land and abundant natural resources, there was another important reason. The people of the Central Plains had been educated in etiquette for thousands of years. The dynasties of the Central Plains also had a set of strict hierarchical system. Those in lower positions were generally respectful and courteous to those in higher positions. The grassland people, on the other hand, were mostly boorish men who liked to be straightforward. In Shelley's view, these people were all barbarians who needed to accept the education of the Central Plains etiquette. Only in this way could he demonstrate his status and authority. This was also one of the important reasons why he put Zhao Dian, a Han, in an important position. It was because he wanted to move the system of the Central Plains imperial court and the etiquette and education that had been passed down for thousands of years in the Central Plains to the grasslands. Only in this way could he be likely heir and become a truly respected emperor. Oh, urgent information from Zhao Dian. Let this Khan take a look. When he heard that it was an urgent intelligence sent by his trusted minister, Shelley attached great importance to it. He quickly walked up and took the letter from the soldier's hand before opening it and reading it carefully. The great Tang's Prince of Wei is leading the teachers and students of Yanhuang College to build a telegraph relay station in Taiyuan. I implore the great Khan to send a troop of 10,000 wolf riders to coordinate with the enemy, to take down Taiyuan City, to capture the great Tang's Prince of Wei and the teachers and students of Yanhuang College alive. After reading the contents in his mind, Shelley put away the letter and fell into deep thought. Obviously, he was weighing the feasibility of Zhao Dian's plan. After all, not long ago, because he had believed in Wu Jie's plan, he had lost 50,000 elite wolf cavalry on the border of the Great Tang, all of them under his command. In the end, not only had he failed to obtain any of the Academy's secrets, he had even lost soldiers. Now that Zhao Dian had requested him to send troops to infiltrate Great Tang, he had no choice but to be cautious. When did Zhao Dian send out this letter? After thinking for a moment, Shelley was still somewhat moved by Zhao Dian's plan. He turned around and asked the soldier. The messenger soldier thought for a moment before replying. Replying to the Great Khan, based on the time, this secret letter should have been sent out by the guard lord this morning. Shelley nodded thoughtfully. On the other side, the soldier seemed to have something to say, but hesitated. What else do you have to report? Shelley seemed to have sensed something as he turned his head to look at the messenger soldier and asked, replying to the Great Khan. According to the usual practice, the guard lord would use 2 carrier pigeons to send 2 letters each time he sent a letter back to prevent any accidents on the way. However, this time, the guard lord sent a carrier pigeon back to the grasslands, but we only received a single carrier pigeon. Chapter 1944. Jia, why did father call you over just now? In a large tent to the west of the Eastern Turkic royal court, a beautiful Turkic woman lifted the curtain and walked in. A tall and mighty black-robed man was seated in front of a couch, wiping a spiked club in his hand. Upon seeing the black-robed man's actions, the woman's cheerful steps suddenly stopped. She stood a few steps in front of the black-robed man and couldn't help but ask, Wu Jie, are you leaving the steppe again? The black-robed man in the tent was none other than the Turkic state teacher, Wu Jie. Last month, after failing to infiltrate the Great Tang and steal the secrets of Yanhuang College, Wu Jie had fled back to the steppe and returned to his old life. Even though Wu Jie and Ashina sure had lost more than 40,000 elite Turkic wolf cavalry in the battle on the Great Tang border, Wu Jie's terrifying strength and his irreplaceable role on the steppe meant that Shelley had only punished Ashina, sure, and not Wu Jie. At that time, Wu Jie had fought several top experts within the borders of Great Tang, and he had also fought the half-step Grandmaster Xianqing of Longhu Mountain outside the Dragon Gate. He had suffered some injuries, but after more than a month of recuperation, His injuries had basically healed. Kagan wants me to lead soldiers to Taiyuan tomorrow. Hearing the woman's voice, Wu Jie's action of wiping his mace suddenly stopped, not even bothering to raise his head as he replied, faintly, in his hoarse voice. Listening to the meaning in his words, when Shelley told him to go to the tent just now, it should be to arrange for him to lead 10,000 wolf cavalry to go to Taiyuan and cooperate with Zhao Dian from the inside and outside to thoroughly take down Taiyuan City. Looking at it this way, Shelley had made up his mind to take the risk according to Zhao Dian's plan. What? Father wants you to lead soldiers to the Great Tang again? How can this be? The woman cried out in alarm and then angrily said, last time, when Father sent you to Chang'an, you almost didn't return. Although your martial arts are formidable and unparalleled, the people of the Central Plains have a saying that 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Moreover, the martial arts world of the Central Plains has as many experts as the clouds. If you are surrounded by them, you will definitely be injured again. Why did Father give you such a dangerous mission? No, I have to go find Father. After saying this, the woman turned to leave. The woman's full name was Ashina Shuyan. She was the pearl of Shelley Kagan's palm and one of his most beloved daughters. Stop. Seeing that Ashina Shuyan was about to go find Shelley, Wu Jie finally raised his head, his back facing Ashina Shuyan as he said, I am the imperial teacher of the great Zhu Dynasty, enjoying the worship of tens of thousands of people. It is only right for me to share the burden of the great Khan. Besides, no one can hurt me. This last sentence showed Wu Jie's confidence in his own strength. Even though he was slightly injured when he fought with Xianqing before the Dragon Gate, he didn't think that Xianqing's strength was higher than his. It was mainly because he had escaped from Cloud Mountain to the Dragon Gate. Before he fought with Xianqing, he had already fought with Mo Huai, the bearded guest, Dugu Exan, Dugu Feng, Li Zixuan, and many other top experts. At that time, he had used up more than half of his true qi, which was why he had suffered a small loss in the hands of Xianqing. If both of them were at their peak, he believed that Xianqing would be defeated within 100 moves. Ashina Shuyan stopped in her tracks and turned around. She stomped her feet angrily and said, Humph. Father has so many warriors under his command. Why do you have to take the risk? What mission did Father send you to Taiyuan for? As the little princess of the Eastern Turkic Khaganate, Ashina Shuyan's loyalty to the Eastern Turkic Khaganate was unquestionable. Therefore, Wu Jie didn't hide it from her. After thinking for a while, he said, half a month ago, Zhao Thian led the wolf guards to sneak into Taiyuan. Now, he and his men are trapped in Taiyuan City. Apart from him, there are also King Wei of Great Tang and some teachers and students from Yanwan College. The Kagan wants me to lead a team of wolf guards to sneak into Great Tang and surround Taiyuan City. Together with Zhao Dian, not only can we take down the city, we can also capture King Wei of Great Tang and the teachers and students from Yanwan College back to the grasslands. What? Father sent you to attack Taiyuan? Ashina Shuyan was shocked when she heard this. She had thought that Xieli had sent Wu Jie to infiltrate the Great Tang like the last time, just to carry out a mission to steal information. She had never imagined that Xieli would send Wu Jie to attack the Great Tang's largest city in the north, Taiyuan City. That was not the Great Tang's border, but the inner pass, not to mention the height and thickness of Taiyuan City. If Taiyuan City was besieged, the surrounding provinces and counties would immediately send reinforcements. Xieli sending Wu Jie on this mission was no different from sending Wu Jie to his death. How many soldiers did Father give you? After coming back to her senses, Ashina Shuyan asked. In Ashina Shuyan's view, to penetrate deep into the heart of the Great Tang's Guangzhou and attack a major city like Taiyuan City, it would be impossible to succeed without at least 100,000 soldiers. 10,000 elite wolf guards. Wu Jie indifferently replied. Then he added, this is Zhao Dian's plan. He has already made arrangements in Taiyuan City. 10,000 soldiers is enough to take down Taiyuan City. Moreover, the situation on the steppe is unstable, and Kagan is concentrating his forces to encircle Tuli. He can't spare too many men. But when she heard the name Zhao Diyin, a hint of anger flashed across Ashina Shuyan's face. She angrily stomped her foot and indignantly said, "Zhao Diyin, it's that treacherous and hateful Han Zhao Diyin again." Father sweat. He must have been possessed by the devil. Ever since he was placed in an important position by Father, not only did he bring the hypocritical habits of the Central Plains to the steppe, he also pushed aside all of Father's trusted generals. Father's prestige on the steppe is now far inferior to before. Also, Wu Jie, you're the state teacher, the #1 expert of the steppe. Zhao Diyin doesn't dare to do anything to you on the surface, but I feel that once his position under Father's command is stabilized, he will definitely push you aside, just like he did everyone else. Previously, you failed to sneak into Yanwang College to steal information and then fled to the Great Tang border. Not long after that, Zhao Diyin took the initiative to personally infiltrate the Great Tang. I feel that he wants to use this opportunity to prove himself in front of Father so that he can replace you in the future. This time, you are leading troops to attack Taiyuan City. Even if you succeed, the credit will not fall to you, but to Zhao Diyin. In the words of the Central Plains, you are making a wedding dress for someone else. Hearing this, Wu Jie didn't feel indignant or indignant. Instead, he maintained a calm expression. Because Ashina Shuyan's words had taken a bit too long, Wu Jie had already picked up his mace and continued to wipe his face. After Ashina Shuyan finished speaking, Wu Jie only gave a feint and then calmed down and continued to busy himself with the matter at hand. Seeing this, Ashina Shuyan was furious. She couldn't help but walk up to Wu Jie and fiercely stomp her foot. "Wu Jie, I've said so much to you. Why haven't you responded at all?" Wu Jie didn't immediately respond to Ashina Shuyan. He put down the silk cloth in his hand and carefully examined the mace. After making sure that the stains on it had been wiped clean, he stood up and looked at Ashina Shuyan. "Yin'er, I don't care. Yin'er, I don't care about this contribution. If Zhao Diyin wants it, he can take it. But I must go on this trip to the Great Tang, and I have my reasons. I also have my reasons." Hearing the latter half of Wu Jie's words, Ashina Shuyan couldn't help trembling, her right hand involuntarily stroking her left wrist. Beneath her sleeve was a priceless black carp bracelet of exquisite craftsmanship. The last time they came back from the Great Tang, Wu Jie had told her that he met a little girl in Cloud Mountain who wore the same jade bracelet as her. He had asked her if she knew this girl, but Ashina Shuyan said she didn't. Since then, there had been some estrangement between the two of them. Now, the relationship between the two of them had become even more estranged. Ashina Shuyan was clear in her heart that the reason Wu Jie had to go was most likely because of the girl who wore the same bracelet as her. In addition, I also want to know who I am. Wu Jie picked up his mace and was about to walk out of the tent, but just as he was about to reach the entrance, he suddenly stopped and muttered to himself before opening the tent's curtain and walking out. Inside the tent, when she heard Wu Jie's last sentence, Ashina Shuyan's face suddenly turned pale and a trace of panic appeared in her eyes, as if she had foreseen something terrible was about to happen. Wu Jie's sentence seemed to have no beginning or end, but it also seemed to have a deep meaning. The amount of information contained in it was too much. Wu Jie, Wu Jie. After a long while, she finally came back to her senses, then quickly turned and ran out of the tent, frantically calling Wu Jie's name. Southeast of the grassland, Tuli's troops, Tang Jian's tent. At this time, Tang Jian was sitting at the table, reading a book and drinking tea leisurely. The book was a good book, and the tea was naturally good tea. It was the immortal tea that was currently popular in the Great Tang, and countless rich people fought over it. This thing was not available in the grassland, because the people of the grassland basically didn't like to drink tea. Besides, even if they liked to drink tea, they couldn't buy tea leaves like the immortal tea. After all, this thing was in short supply in the Great Tang. These tea leaves were naturally brought over by Tang Jian from the Great Tang. If he didn't drink it now, it would only benefit Tuli and Ni Shu Ta. Grand Duke, you still have a leisure to read and drink tea? At this time, a tall man with sword-like eyebrows walked in and saw Tang Jian leisurely sitting at the table. He couldn't help but sigh helplessly. This man was the captain of the guards who escorted Tang Jian to the grassland. You Minghu. Oh, Minghu, you're here? Hearing this voice, Tang Jian put down the book in his hand, raised his head, and smiled indifferently. What's wrong? What happened? Now that we're all alive and well, why can't this old man have the leisure to read and drink tea? Chapter 1945. Right now, we are indeed still alive. But if this continues, I estimate that in 2 days, our heads will be separated from our bodies. Southeast of the grassland, Tuli's troops, Tang Jian's tent. Yu Minghu looked at the leisurely Tang Jian and helplessly smiled. Tang Jian still had a leisurely attitude. Hearing this, he asked with a smile, "Why do you say that, Minghu?" Compared to the other courtiers in the current court, in terms of intelligence, Tang Jian might not be as good as Fang Xianling and Zhang Sunwuji. In terms of decisiveness, he might not be as good as Du Ruhui. In terms of honesty, he might not even be as good as Wei Zheng. But regardless of whether he was in good times or bad, Tang Jian was always able to maintain an optimistic attitude. It was this optimistic attitude, coupled with his unique vision, that allowed him to have a place for himself in the imperial court of the early Tang Dynasty, where the stars were shining brightly. Yu Minghu was not as well-mannered as Tang Jian. He said worriedly, "Today, Tuli suffered a defeat. He and his trusted generals want to vent their anger on Duke. But according to this subordinate's estimation, in the next few days, Tuli will suffer even more defeats. According to their nature, I'm afraid that when the time comes, they will make things even more difficult for us." At this point, Yu Minghu deliberately paused. Seeing that there was still no reaction on Tang Jian's face, he could not help but continue. In today's battle, Tuli's troops lost 40,000 troops. Moreover, according to this subordinate's knowledge, the ones besieging Tuli's troops were only the other tribes of the grassland that rely on Xieli. They were not Xieli's elite wolf riders. Although there are still 2 days left until the 8th month, this subordinate estimates that if the 10-tribe coalition cannot completely take down Tuli's troops by tomorrow night, on the last day of the 7th month, Xieli will definitely gather his elite wolf riders and launch an all-out attack on Tuli's troops. Xieli has been able to control the grassland tribes for the past few years. The wolf riders under his command have unparalleled fighting strength. Moreover, the Turkic state preceptor, Wu Jie, is an expert of the great Grandmaster realm. If he also participates in the battle, Tuli's troops will definitely not last a day. At that time, even if Tuli does not kill us if we fall into Xieli's hands, I am afraid it will be difficult for us to survive. As a warrior, Yu Minghu was even more aware than Tang Jian of the terror of a martial Grandmaster expert. Although no matter how powerful a warrior was, he would not be able to defeat a well-trained army. However, if an expert like a martial Grandmaster were to lead an army and personally lead this army in a battle, then the combat power of this army would be raised by several levels. With the current situation of Tuli's troops, if Wu Jie were to lead a 10,000-man wolf cavalry army to attack, Tuli would never be able to resist. In the end, Xieli didn't want to consume his strength right now. Wu Jie and the wolf riders were his trump cards, and until the last moment, he wouldn't use them easily. Wu Jie. Is that Wu Jie who snuck into Cloud Mountain alone and led the Turkic wolf cavalry outside Longmen Pass to escape the encirclement of the Great Tang's 4 provinces? Hearing the name Wu Jie, Tang Jian's expression finally changed, raising his head and asking meaningfully. Yu Minghu nodded and replied, "It is that person." This subordinate heard that Wu Jie was able to resist Mo Huai and Zhang Zhongjian, 2 peak Grandmaster experts, and smoothly escaped from the encirclement of the imperial army. Later, the Marquis of Yong and led an army to stop Wu Jie at Longmen Pass, but he was unexpectedly heavily injured. In the end, it was Taoist Master Xianqing of Longhu Mountain who arrived in time to stop Wu Jie and the Turkic wolf cavalry. Otherwise, Longmen Pass would have been defeated. This person's martial arts are so high that he is probably invincible in the world. If he personally led an army to attack Tuli's troops, I'm afraid that the defenses here would collapse in an instant. Thus, Grand Duke, we must make plans as soon as possible. Tang Jian furrowed his brow in silence. He was not a member of the martial arts world, but he was born into a noble family, had experienced troubled times, and had mingled in the imperial court. He had some understanding of martial arts, so he naturally understood what Yu Minghu was saying. After a moment of silence, Tang Jian spoke. Make plans as soon as possible. We came to the grasslands with the Emperor's mandate. If we don't complete the mission, how can we face His Majesty? The only thing we can do now is to firmly believe that frost will fall on the grasslands in the next 2 days. Other than that, we have no other choice. Speaking of this, Tang Jian's eyes revealed a sense of determination. He said in a deep voice, "Moreover, this old man believes in His Majesty. I believe that the prophecy of frost falling in July will come true." During the late Sui Dynasty, Tang Jian and Li Er were very good friends. The two of them had similar interests and were close friends. They regarded each other as confidants. Although they were now monarchs and ministers, Tang Jian still trusted Li Er unconditionally. Li Er naturally also trusted his old friend. Otherwise, he would not have handed over such an important task to Tang Jian. If the prophecy of frost falling in midsummer at the end of July came true for Tang Jian, their purpose of coming to the grasslands would be more than half completed. When that time came, rumors about Xieli's misconduct caused Longevity Heaven's wrath would spread in all tribes of the grasslands. Those tribes of the grasslands who were originally disloyal to Xieli would probably rise up and resist Xieli's tyranny together. Pay attention to the news from Xieli's side. If he really does send Wu Jie to personally lead an army to encircle and annihilate Tuli's troops, we have to remind Tuli to make preparations. Tang Jian sighed and gave Yu Minghu an order. Yes, Duke. Yu Minghu naturally left to carry out the order. Taiyuan City, Tongfu Inn. Guard Lord, it seems like your status in the grasslands is not low. Earlier, when the 50 to 60 people had suddenly charged into the inn, Li Junxian had immediately dashed forward and grabbed the nearby Zhao Dian. At this moment, hearing the cries of the warriors downstairs, Li Junxian gripped Zhao Dian's neck and coldly laughed. Although his neck was gripped, Zhao Dian did not appear very panicked. He lightly snorted and mocked. I didn't think that the Grand Commander of 100 Cavalry, a Grandmaster expert, would actually take this Zhao, a scholar who doesn't even have the strength to trust a chicken, hostage. Should I say that Commander Li is lacking in grace? Or is he lacking in martial virtue? What fine lacking in martial virtue? Anyone else might have been goaded into letting Zhao Dian go, but Li Junxian was different. Although he was a Grandmaster, he was a member of the Imperial Court, not a member of the martial arts world. For him, completing the mission given by the Imperial Court was his #1 priority. As for martial virtue, was letting Zhao Dian go and having his 700 subordinates fight with 80 to 90 people a matter of martial virtue? Say what you want. Li Junxian nonchalantly chuckled, and then he threatened, "This general will not let his subordinates throw away their lives. Immediately have your men put down their weapons and surrender, or else." His right hand tightened around Zhao Dian's neck, and Zhao Dian immediately found it difficult to breathe. A few moments later, this fellow's face turned red. It was clear that Li Junxian had not used any small amount of strength. Ugh! Zhao Dian couldn't help but groan and slap away Li Junxian's right hand. Seeing this, Li Junxian slightly loosened his grip, and Zhao Dian hurriedly covered his neck with his hand and began to violently cough. Cough, cough. Commander Li truly has a good plan, but this Zhao will not let his subordinates surrender. At worst, we'll just die together. Huh. If I can kill a commander of 100 Tang cavalry, this Zhao Dian's life will be worth it. Contrary to Li Junxian's expectations, Zhao Dian was not intimidated by Li Junxian's threat. On the contrary, he was even more vicious than Li Junxian. After mocking Li Junxian, Zhao Dian looked down at his subordinates and shouted, "Kill! Don't worry about this, God. Li Junxian couldn't help but be taken aback. Zhao Yin's subordinates downstairs were also slightly stunned when they heard this. Everyone hesitated to move forward because although Zhao Diyin had shouted this, if they really rashly went forward and caused Zhao Diyin to lose his life, then what would be left for them after returning to the grassland would still be a dead end. Li Junxian's eyes narrowed as he slightly clenched his right hand. At the same time, he warily and threateningly glared at the warriors downstairs. For a moment, the two sides were in a standoff. Zhao Diyin's men did not dare to recklessly step forward, while Li Junxian's men naturally would not attack for no reason. This was because while none of Zhao Diyin's subordinates were top-class experts at the Grandmaster realm, the vast majority were at the Qi transformation realm. In terms of numbers, Zhao Diyin's men had the absolute advantage. If they ignored Zhao Diyin's life and attacked together, Li Junxian's men would not be able to hold, not even if Li Junxian was a Grandmaster. In this situation, Grandmasters were not invincible existences. While Li Junxian could take on 10 of these Qi transformation experts alone, he could not take on 80 or 90 of them. Perhaps only a Grandmaster like Wu Jie could do this. Therefore, neither side dared to act rashly for the time being. This stalemate required a third force to break the stalemate. But this stalemate was completely acceptable to Zhao Diyin. He had remained at the inn precisely to buy time for Xian Yi and Celestial Eagle to attack the post house. In truth, he had not known that the cavalry that had come to the inn was led by Li Junxian. Now that he knew, he could only rejoice. If he had not used himself as bait and sent 10-some people to stop Li Junxian's men, there was a high chance that Li Junxian's cavalry would have been able to effortlessly deal with them. And after dealing with his men, Li Junxian's men would have continued to pursue Xian Yi, Celestial Eagle, and the rest of the group that had attacked the post house. In that case, his plan would have been completely exposed. Right now, all he needed to do was delay Li Junxian until Xian Yi succeeded. At that time, even if he was captured by Li Junxian, it would be fine because Li Tai would already be in their hands. The offensive and defensive positions would be reversed. Chapter 1946. Quick, quick! In the darkness of the night, a group of over 100 people held torches as they galloped south on the main street of Taiyuan City. Their speed was very fast. Everywhere they passed, smoke and dust flew up. When the heavy horse hooves hit the green stone road, it made a d-d-d noise, waking countless people who had already fallen asleep along the way. The bailiffs who were patrolling the streets at night also noticed the loud noise, but before they could get close, the other party had already galloped far away on their horses. How could their 2 legs catch up to the 4 legs of the other party? They could only look at the other party's back and sigh helplessly. Mother Astersker, where did this group come from? Galloping horses in the city at night. Do they still want to live? Boss, should we report to the provincial governor and send people to arrest them? A group of bailiffs looked at the departing figures of the group, and one of them cursed. This is already the 3rd group, but the first 2 groups were the Imperial Army and the soldiers of the Bing Province barracks. This group looks like ordinary people. Another person chimed in. Pa! Pa! The leader of the bailiffs angrily slapped the 2 of them on the head and said, "Don't worry. All of you shut up. Which ordinary family can afford to raise so many horses? Who dares to gallop on the streets at night in defiance of the curfew? This matter is not something we can deal with. Just report it to the provincial governor. Continue patrolling. Tonight is not peaceful, so keep your eyes open. Do you understand?" "Yes." The bailiffs roared in response. Just as the leader of the bailiffs had said, Taiyuan City was not destined to be peaceful tonight. First, Du Gufeng led the Imperial Army from the north to the south. Then, Fong Gongteng led several hundred cavalry from the Bing Province barracks in the northwest to the southeast. Now, another group of people had appeared out of nowhere and were heading south. These people treated the curfew policy of Taiyuan City as nothing, but at the same time, it was clear that these people were not ordinary people. After all, how could ordinary people be so bold? Moreover, The leader of the bailiffs had clearly seen this group of people coming from the direction of the Wang clan's ancestral home. This meant that this group was very likely from the Wang clan. Although they were bailiffs of the provincial government, they could not afford to offend the Wang clan. The leader of the bailiffs had guessed correctly. This group of people was the Wang family's hidden guards. The leader was the commander of the Wang family's hidden guards, Wang Chengwu. They had rushed to the Tongfu in under Wang Yu's orders. Firstly, they wanted to capture the innkeeper, Sun Dafu, or the owner, Gao Yong. Secondly, they wanted to see if Wang Li and the others were hiding in the inn. In terms of time, Wang Yu and Li Junxian had decided to send their men to Tongfu Inn at almost the same time. But in terms of distance, Li Junxian's temporary base in Taiyuan City was 4 to 5 times closer to Tongfu Inn in the Wang clan's ancestral residence. Thus, while Li Junxian's men were already fighting with Zhao Diyin's men in the inn, Wang Chengwu's men were still on their way. But the arrival of Wang Chengwu's men was likely to be the key to breaking the stalemate in the inn. Within Tongfu Inn, both sides stood on opposite sides. Li Junxian's men had retreated to the corridor on the second floor, while Zhao Diyin's men stood in the main hall on the first floor. As for Zhao Diyin himself, he was naturally under Li Junxian's control. Chapter 1947. I am Wang Chengwu, commander of the Wang clan guard. Who is good, sir? Do you know where shopkeeper's son is? Within Tongfu Inn, Wang Chengwu followed Li Junxian's voice to the corridor on the second floor. As he examined Li Junxian, he couldn't help but grimace. Although the man in the corridor didn't seem very old, he couldn't see through his cultivation level. What did this mean? This meant that this man was probably as strong as he was. Since when did Taiyuan City have another martial arts master of the Grandmaster realm? Wang Chengwu couldn't help but be confused. There were many martial artists in the world who were at the Qi transformation realm and below, but those who reached the Grandmaster realm were all renowned figures or great generals of the imperial court. The number of Grandmasters in each region could be counted on one hand, so Wang Chengwu wasn't making a fuss over nothing. So, it was Commander Wang of the Wang clan. Li Junxian's eyes flashed upon hearing Wang Chengwu's identity, and he couldn't help but inwardly sigh in relief. Based on the information the 100 horsemen had gathered, Wang Chengwu was a member of the Wang clan's main branch, and the Wang clan's main branch and second branch were not on the same side. On the way to the inn, he had received news that Wang Kuei had fled in fear of punishment and that the entire Wang clan was searching for him. Although he didn't know why Wang Chengwu had brought people to Tongfu Inn, if Wang Chengwu wasn't working with Wang Kuei and Zhao Diyin, then this was good news. With these thoughts in mind, Li Junxian turned to Wang Chengwu and said, "This general is 100 horseman Li Junxian, and I have been ordered by the emperor to secretly protect His Highness King of Wei in Taiyuan City. Commander Wang, these people are all spies hiding in Taiyuan City, and their leader is Zhao Diyin. Commander Wang, you've come at just the right time. Why don't you help this general capture these people and send them to the provincial governor's residence?" Although he had sent someone to the provincial governor's office to ask for help in advance, the provincial governor's office was far away from the inn. It would take some time for the reinforcements from the provincial governor's office to arrive. No one knew what the situation would be like then. Rather than that, it was better to borrow the Wang clan's forces to capture Zhao Diyin's group. What? Zhao Diyin? Wang Chengwu's pupils constricted at the name Zhao Diyin. Before nightfall, Dugu Xian had personally visited the Wang clan to inform Wang Yu of the secret letter that Han Lijing had brought to Taiyuan City and had asked Wang Yu to search the city for Zhao Diyin. Wang Chengwu was one of Wang Yu's trusted aides, knew that all this turmoil in Taiyuan City was Zhao Diyin's work. Thus, when he heard Li Junxian's report that Zhao's group, Wang's report was Li's. So when he heard Li that was SSS, he's people's is his clan's group. S's was? Li S was. S he. Wang. S Wang. ST. Li ST. ST. Wang S. Do. It's Stes. The group of Wang family dark guards roared in agreement. Then all of them drew their weapons and charged towards Zhao Diyin's subordinates. Chapter 1948. Taiyuan Courier Station. A major battle was on the verge of breaking out. The Imperial Army was fighting against Xian Yi and the other Turkic spies on the eastern side of the courier station. The Imperial Army, under Dugu Xian's command, had already assumed the shape of a goose. As the strongest of the Imperial Army, Dugu Xian naturally stood at the very center of the formation. His direct opponent was the strongest of the enemy, Xian Yi. In terms of martial arts, both Dugu Xian and Xian Yi were at the initial stage of the Grandmaster realm. Dugu Xian's advantage lay in his exquisite swordsmanship. In terms of swordsmanship, there were no more than 10 people in the world who could defeat him. On the other hand, Xian Yi's advantage lay in his bizarre movement techniques and his innumerable sneak attacks. This morning, Dugu Xian had fought with Xian Yi in the southern part of the city. But at the time, Xian Yi's side had outnumbered him, and they had even used hidden weapons, poisons, and all sorts of underhanded sneak attacks. Only then had Dugu Xian been defeated and heavily injured. In a direct confrontation, Xian Yi might not have been a match for Dugu Xian, but there were no ifs in this world. In a confrontation between two armies, the most important thing was the final outcome, not the methods used in the process. The winner was king, and the loser was a bandit. For Dugu Xian and Xian Yi, this was a battle where one of them would die. Only the victor could survive. However, Dugu Xian had yet to recover from his injuries, and he could only use 50% of his strength at most. As a result, his chances of victory were extremely slim. Clang! Dugu Xian raised the sword in his hand and poured his true qi into it. The sword hummed with a clang. This sword had a spirit, and the Dugu clan had invited the master swordsmith Zhang Crow to forge it. Although it was not as famous as the Crow 9 swords, it was still extremely sharp. Ever since Dugu Xian had made some small achievements in martial arts, this sword had always been by his side. The sword had no name, but the experts who had fallen to it were all top-notch experts who had long been famous. At this moment, this sword seemed to be able to sense the resolve in its master's heart. As the sword hummed, it began to tremble. This was excitement, or perhaps anxiety. Because he had been recovering from his injuries, Dugu Xian was not wearing armor, only a white robe and a black cloak. At this moment, Dugu Xian's long hair and cloak fluttered despite the lack of wind. A moment ago, he had looked like a weak and wounded soldier, but now, as he raised his sword and poured true qi into it, his aura quickly reached its peak. In terms of aura, he was no weaker than when he was at his peak. Sensing Dugu Xian's rapidly rising aura, Xian Yi could not help but be shocked. Has Dugu Xian really recovered his full strength? This didn't make any sense. Even if all the poison he had left in Dugu Xian's body had been cured by Gongsun Liang, Dugu Xian could not have recovered to his peak state so quickly, unless he was a celestial immortal who was impervious to all poisons. Solitary wind, swordsmanship. Xian Yi's mood was very complicated at this moment. He found it hard to believe, but Dugu Xian did not give him the chance to continue thinking. Dugu Xian stomped on the ground and soared into the air. His left hand formed a sword seal, and his right hand held the sword as he executed a series of complex sword moves. His speed in the air skyrocketed again, and he and his sword were like a stream of light in the night sky, stabbing straight at Xian Yi. This was the Dugu clan's sword technique, the solitary wind swordsmanship. In terms of sword moves, the solitary wind swordsmanship was not as exquisite as the Dugu 9 swords, but Dugu Xian had been practicing this sword technique for more than 10 years and had long reached the point of mastery. There was no absolute good or bad sword technique in this world. Once a sword technique reached the point of mastery, its power could not be underestimated. The main reason Dugu Xian had been able to use the first 7 moves of the solitary wind swordsmanship in such a short time was that this sword technique had already been deeply ingrained in his bones. He could create sword moves with just a wave of his hand. Secondly, when Li Zixuan had deduced the sword moves of the Dugu 9 swords and taught them to Dugu Xian, Dugu had discovered that his solitary wind swordsmanship had some similarities with the Dugan 9 swords. The two complemented each other, and the solitary wind swordsmanship that Dugu was using had been improved, and its power was far greater than before. Fast. Dugu was originally only about 60 meters away from Xianyi, but he had become one with his sword. Under the stimulation of his sword move, he and his sword were as fast as flowing light. The distance of 60 meters was covered in an instant. Before Xianyi could recover from the shock on his face, Dugu sword had already arrived. Dugu who had yet to recover from his heavy injuries and had lost much of his strength, had chosen to take the initiative and attack. Moreover, his first attack was a sure kill strike without any fancy moves. Before this, who could have imagined that Dugu would attack in such a domineering and powerful manner? The Imperial Army's soldiers were dumbfounded. Dugu had been ambushed in the southern part of the city in the morning. He had been poisoned and severely injured, and he had almost died. Almost all the Imperial Army soldiers knew about this. In their view, after a day of recuperation, Dugu had at most recovered a portion of his strength. There was no way he could have returned to his peak condition. But what was the situation now? The chilling sword aura that was wreaking havoc around Dugu did not seem like something that a heavily injured person should be able to exude. The Turkic spies behind Xianyi were also dumbfounded. Before they came to the post house, Hadan Zhao, Diyin, and Xianyi said that Dugu had been heavily injured and was an arrow at the end of its flight. But the strength that Dugu was displaying now did not seem like an arrow at the end of its flight at all. Roar! Although Dugu attack was very fast and caught him off guard, Xianyi was a grandmaster expert after all. After a brief moment of shock, Xianyi roared under the powerful threat of death. He did not draw his sword to block Dugu attack. Instead, he chose to retreat with all his might. Dugu had gathered all his strength in this attack, and his sword momentum had already reached great mastery. Xianyi did not dare to meet this attack head-on in a hurry. Moreover, he was best at assassination and hidden weapons, not head-on combat. Therefore, his only choice now was to retreat and avoid the attack for the time being. When Dugu attack failed, and he switched to another move, he would strike again and deal the fatal blow. Xianyi's lightness technique was superior to Dugu in the first place. Even though he had launched his attack after Dugu he still managed to narrowly avoid Dugu sure kill strike. However, even though he managed to dodge, the other Turkic spies standing beside and behind him were not so lucky. Dugu attack was ferocious and indomitable. The surging sword aura around the sword was like a tangible blade, slashing directly at the people standing near Xianyi. Almost all the Turkic spies who did not manage to escape in time were injured by Dugu sword aura. In the blink of an eye, all 12 Turkic spies were injured and lying on the ground. What a pity! Dugu shook his head slightly as he looked at the result of his attack. He could not help but feel disappointed. Theoretically speaking, it was impossible for him to use that attack in his current state. However, the unprecedented, desperate situation had stimulated his body's huge potential. In addition, he had mobilized almost all the true chi in his body to use the first 7 moves of the Lonely Wind Sword technique. That was why the power of that attack was so terrifying. Dugu was well aware of his own situation. He knew that in his current state, he had no chance of defeating Xianyi if he attacked normally. He could not afford to waste his true chi. Dugu had planned to take advantage of the fact that Xianyi was not fully prepared to deal him a powerful attack. If this attack could seriously injure Xianyi, then the rest of the Imperial Army would be dealt with by themselves. There would be no need for him to do anything at all. However, Xianyi had actually managed to dodge a sure kill attack. That made things even more troublesome. On one hand, Xianyi would definitely be on guard after that attack. Even if he used the same move again, he would not be able to injure Xianyi in the slightest. On the other hand, that attack had used up most of his true chi. It would be very difficult for him to use another attack of the same power Swish, 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 swish. Xian Yi, who had dodged Dugu Xian's sure-kill attack, could not help but be shocked and enraged when he saw this scene. One had to know that he and Sky Eagle had brought people to ambush the post house, and they were already at a disadvantage in terms of numbers. Now that Dugu Xian had directly injured more than 10 of them, they were even more disadvantaged in terms of numbers. If Dugu Xian swung his sword a few more times, wouldn't all of his men be cut down to the ground? In the end, he would be the only commander without an army left on the battlefield. He could not allow Dugu Xian to slaughter his men wantonly. Shocked and enraged, Xian Yi did not stop after stabilizing himself. With a flick of his sleeves, 5 thin needles shimmering with cold light flew toward different parts of Dugu Xian's body. The speed of the needles flying through the air was even faster than when Dugu Xian had become one with his sword. Using offense as defense, he wanted to restrain Dugu Xian with a sharp attack so that the martial artists on his side who were below the Grandmaster realm would not be killed by Dugu Xian, a Grandmaster expert. Dugu Xian, who had already suffered in the south of the city in the morning, knew that Xian Ye's 5 needles must have been smeared with poison. Naturally, he did not dare to take them head-on. However, the 5 needles that Xian Yi had thrown out were coming from different directions, almost sealing off all his escape routes. It was impossible for him to rely on his body movement to dodge these 5 poison needles. 9 strategies of the Dugu sword. Arrow, breaking style. Dugu Xian did not hesitate in the face of these 5 needles. He swung his sword and used the arrow-breaking style of the 9 strategies of the Dugu sword, which was specially designed to deal with hidden weapons. There was a flash of sword light in the air, and the 5 needles that came from different directions were all hit by Dugu Xian. Ding, ding, ding. The needles fell to the limestone floor with crisp sounds. Xian Ye's sneak attack had also failed. Chapter 1949. Let's go together. Use all the skills you're best at and end the battle quickly. Xian Yi was not discouraged by the failure of his sneak attack, because Dugu Xian seemed to have recovered to his peak state. Although he did not understand why, he had to admit it when the truth was right in front of him. Therefore, in order to prevent the situation from worsening, Xian Yi did not intend to continue fighting Dugu Xian alone. He roared at his men around him. Zhao Dian's men had not only gone through harsh and cruel training, but most of them were notorious scum of the martial arts world in the Central Plains before they joined the Turks. Each of them was more vicious than the other. In terms of head-on strength, they might not be as good as the Imperial Army, but in terms of sneak attacks, the Imperial Army was far inferior to them. And tonight's darkness was the best cover for their sneak attacks. Yes, sir. The men around Xian Yi answered loudly and then scattered. Those who were good at lightness skills simply jumped onto the roof. The 100 or so men spread out in a fan shape. Obviously, they understood what Xian Yi meant. Faced with the Imperial Army that had already set up a formation, if they charged at them together, they would only be killed. Only by spreading out and disrupting the Imperial Army's formation with some sneak attacks could they possibly break the formation. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. For a moment, all kinds of hidden weapons, such as hidden arrows, flying daggers, and poisonous needles, were shot out in all directions toward the Imperial Army that had set up a formation. Other than that, a few of them lit up balls with fire and threw them at the Imperial Army. Immediately, thick smoke rose from the Imperial Army's position. Clank, clank, clank. Metal clanked. The hidden weapons, such as hidden arrows, flying daggers, and poisonous needles thrown by the Turkic spies, did not cause much damage to the Imperial Guards. After all, the Imperial Guards were one of the most elite troops in Chang'an. They were dedicated to guarding the Imperial Palace. Every Imperial Guard was wearing excellent Mingguang armor. Ordinary swords and sabers could not penetrate their armor, let alone hidden arrows and flying daggers. Unless these hidden weapons happened to pierce the gaps between the joints of the armor, or directly hit the faces of the Imperial Guards. Physical attacks wouldn't work, but magical attacks would. The incense that the Turkic spies had thrown at the Imperial Army was clearly incense capable of releasing poisonous smoke. The Mingguang armor worn by the Imperial Army could block the attacks of ordinary hidden weapons, but could not block the pervasive poisonous smoke. Everyone, cover your noses and mouths. We'll form teams of 3 and help each other. Don't let anyone pass. Dugu Xin had truly been caught off guard by this sudden turn of events. His original plan had been to use his life to hold down Xianyi and leave the rest of the small fries to his Imperial Army. Although these Turkic spies were all powerful martial artists, the Imperial Army was skilled in battle formations. Once they were in formation, the Turkic spies would never be able to defeat the Imperial Army, even if they were twice as numerous. However, who would have thought that Xianyi wouldn't play by the rules at all? He directly ordered everyone to scatter and fight on their own. Moreover, he used some dirty tricks. Therefore, he hurriedly shouted. Chapter 1950. 9 Swords of Dugu, Sword-Breaking Style, Taiyuan Courier Station, East Side. Dugu Xin gritted his teeth in the face of the dozen or so bolts of sword qi flying toward him. Mustering the remaining true qi in his body, he leaped into the air with his sword and executed the most complex and exquisite sword-breaking style of the 9 Swords of Dugu. The essence of the 9 Swords of Dugu was that the moment one saw a flaw in the opponent's moves, one would exploit it to strike first. Although Dugu Xion's 9 Swords of Dugu was not as proficient as his solitary wind swordsmanship, he had already grasped the sword will of the 9 Swords of Dugu. The 9 Swords of Dugu was a set of swordsmanship that placed great emphasis on sword will. The crux of it was the sword will and not the moves. In that instant, Dugu Xian had seen through the flaws in the swordsmanship of the dozen or so people. Infusing true qi into his sword, he executed the Dugu family's unique lightness technique and flew toward the Turkic spy at the very front. His speed was extremely fast. Seeing that Dugu Xian was advancing instead of retreating in the face of their attacks, the Turkic spy was first stunned, then overjoyed. But in the next moment, the joy on his face froze, because Dugu Xion's sword had already arrived. This Turkic spy loved to advance prematurely, so he was at the very front. Moreover, the sword move he executed was also a sure kill move that only attacked and did not defend. Thus, the area around his left rib was completely exposed to the opponent. Dugu Xian arrived in front of the Turkic spy. With a flash, he dodged the other party's attack and turned to stab his sword at the other party's left rib. With the Turkic spy's current position, there was no way he could save him in time. Splat! This was the sound of a sharp blade piercing flesh. The sword in Dugu Xion's hand pierced through the Turkic spy's left rib and into his heart without any hindrance. Ah! The Turkic spy was only halfway through his wretched howl before he breathed his last and plummeted from the sky. Xianyi, who was rushing towards Dugu Xian, and the others behind him all sucked in a breath of cold air when they saw this, and they couldn't help but slow down their advance. Fast, too fast. From the moment he swung his sword to the moment he killed his opponent, it took less than 2 breaths of time. In other words, it was only the time of one move. Before this, who would have thought that Dugu Xian would be able to kill a martial arts expert at the peak of Qi transforming stage in a single move? Didn't they say that Dugu Xian was heavily injured and had less than 1/10 of his strength left? But why was this guy even more ferocious than before? In fact, it was not that Dugu Xian had become stronger. On the contrary, his current state of strength was far inferior to when he had not been injured in the morning. There was no doubt about this. His current state only looked very fierce, but only he knew the actual state of his body. Whether it was injuring more than a dozen Turkic spies with a single sword or killing a Qi transformation stage expert with a single move, Dugu Xian had done it under the premise of overdrawing his own life potential. In addition, the solitary 9 swords and solitary wind swordsmanship were indeed exquisite and peerless supreme swordsmanship, and he had to pay a heavy price for it. Bam! The Turkic spy whose heart had been pierced by Dugu Xian's sword fell heavily to the ground. At the same time, Dugu Xian also landed on the roof. However, If one were to look closely, one would be able to see that his body was a little unstable at this moment. However, the night was very dark. Although there were many scattered torches on the ground, the light on the roof was still very poor. Thus, Xian Yi and the others did not notice this detail. Who else? Bring it on if you don't want to die. I, Dugu Exin, will accompany you to the end. Dugu Exin roared as he faced Xian Yi and the others with his sword in hand. There was a hint of heroism and arrogance in his voice. Apart from that, there was also a hint of the sorrow of a hero at the end of his road. Dugu Exin knew that he was truly an arrow at the end of its flight. He could not hold on for much longer. If the other party charged at him without regard for anything else, he would probably only be able to last a few rounds at most. However, the people behind Xian Yi were frightened out of their wits by Dugu Exin's arrogant roar. They all stopped their attacks and landed on the roof. Xian Yi was enraged when he saw this. He roared angrily and said, "You bastard!" He roared, "A bunch of idiots. He's just scaring you. Are you so easily frightened?" Even if he wasn't injured, even if he was in peak condition, he still wouldn't be a match for us. All of you, attack together and finish him off as quickly as possible. Kill anyone who dares to take another step back. Xian, you couldn't be blamed for being so angry. The situation on the battlefield was truly very unfavorable for them. Their tinsome experts were being held back by Dugu Exin alone, while the rest of them were fighting with the 200-some Imperial Army soldiers. The Imperial Army soldiers were in groups of 3, helping each other out. Their coordination was ingenious, and they fought very methodically. As a result, Xian Yi's men were at a complete disadvantage. In just a few moments, several of their men had already died at the hands of the Imperial Army. In such a situation, every time they lost a man, the pressure on the survivors would increase. This was because the Imperial Army soldiers who had been besieging Dugu Exin would go and help the other Imperial Army soldiers who were still fighting after they were freed up. This was a chain effect. Once they were at a disadvantage, it would only get worse and worse until all of them died here. Yes. The people behind Xian Yi couldn't help but be stunned when they heard this, but they quickly reacted. That's right. Didn't they already defeat Dugu Exin in the south of the city when he wasn't injured? Although they didn't know why Dugu Exin looked so fierce now, it was impossible for him to have recovered from the injuries he suffered in the morning. As such, their chances of defeating Dugu Exin again would be even higher. That's right, these people were the ones who had followed Xian Yi in the morning to ambush and injure Dugu Exin in the south of the city. Understanding this, the crowd gathered their morale. Under Xian Yi's lead, they once again raised their swords and stabbed at Dugu Exin. Dugu Exin groaned inwardly. He had taken the initiative to attack and kill a peak chi transforming expert with one strike in order to intimidate these people and make them cower in fear. This way, he could buy as much time as possible for Li Tai to escape. However, Xian Yi didn't fall for it. He had no choice but to raise his sword and continue fighting. After all, the Imperial Army's victory wasn't assured yet. He still had to buy time for the Imperial Army. However, there were some things that couldn't be done with persistence. Dugu Exin's Solitary 9 swords and Solitary Wind swordplay were exquisite, but these two swordplay only attacked and didn't defend. They consumed a lot of chi. After the previous 2 strikes, Dugu Exin's chi was almost depleted. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. Even if he forcefully raised his chi, it would be difficult for him to withstand this round of attacks from Xian Yi and the others. This was indeed the case. After Dugu Exin found the weakness of the 2 Turkic spies and stabbed them with his sword, the other 2 Turkic spies stabbed at his back like lightning. At the same time, Xian Yi flicked his sleeve and 3 thin needles flew toward Dugu Exin's left and right shoulders, as well as 3 inches above his dantian. In the blink of an eye, Dugu Exin seemed to have fallen into a desperate situation. The situation changed so quickly that it caught everyone off guard. Dugu Exin uses light body movement technique to dodge, but due to the lack of chi, his movements were still half a beat too slow. The 2 long swords directly pierced through Dugu Exin's shoulder blades, while the 3 thin needles that flew towards him pierced into his left and right shoulders and abdomen respectively. Compared to the position that Xianyi had originally aimed at, the needles were about an inch off target. Puff, puff, puff. The first 2 sounds were the sound of sharp swords piercing flesh. The last sound was the sound of Dugu Exen, who had yet to recover from his injuries, being injured again. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood, which contained bits of his internal organs. Although these 2 swords hadn't taken his life, they had aggravated his injuries. If he wasn't treated in time, he wouldn't be able to live for long. More importantly, the 3 thin needles that Xianyi had driven into his body were coated with poison. In less than an hour, he would die from the poison. Can die. At this moment, Dugu Exayan could clearly feel the strength in his body rapidly dissipating. He knew that this was a sign that he was about to fall into a coma or die. However, Dugu Exayan was unwilling to fall just like that. This was because below the roof was still his comrade who had fought with him for many years. And behind him was Li Tai in the main building of the post house. No matter what, he couldn't allow Li Tai to fall into the hands of these Turkic spies. Dugu Exayan, who was on the brink of death, suddenly let out a deafening roar. Then, the rapidly dissipating strength in his body miraculously gathered back together. Wielding his sword, he turned around and swept it across, beheading the 2 Turkic spies behind him who hadn't been able to react in time. However, Dugu Exayan's series of movements had caused the 2 swords that had pierced into his shoulder blades to leave a deeper and wider wound on his shoulder. Blood flowed like a river. Blood instantly dyed Dugu Exayan's entire back red. His eyes were red, and his hair was disheveled from the battle. He looked like a crazed demon. General, Dugu Exayan's roar finally attracted the attention of the Imperial Army soldiers who were fighting with the Turk spies. Seeing Dugu Exayan's figure swaying on the roof with 2 swords sticking out of his back, the eyes of the Imperial Army soldiers turned bloodshot, their eyes bulging out of their sockets. The man on the roof was not only their respected commander, but he had also ignored his injuries to face the enemy's strongest experts alone. How many generals in the world would cherish their soldiers so much? Protect the general. Quick, protect the general. Thus, the Imperial Army soldiers gave up on fighting the Turkic spies and rushed toward Dugu Exayan with all their might. That man was their spiritual pillar. They couldn't allow him to fall. Chapter 1951. Your Highness, the situation outside is very disadvantageous to us. Please evacuate the post house as soon as possible. We are willing to risk our lives to help Your Highness break out of the encirclement. The deafening roar of Dugu Exayan when he was heavily injured by Xianyi and the others clearly traveled to the room where Li Tai was staying in the central building of the post house. When the 2 Imperial guards at the door heard the mournful, painful, and sorrowful roar, they couldn't help but change their expressions. A trace of anxiety and unease flashed across their faces, but after a moment of hesitation, they resolutely turned around and pushed open the door, solemnly cupping their fists in greeting to Li Tai. After realizing that something had happened to Dugu Exayan, the first reaction of these 2 Imperial guards was to rush out to rescue Dugu Exayan. However, they couldn't help but recall what Dugu Exayan had said before he left. Wang Tong, Guijian, the 2 of you stay here and protect His Highness. If the situation is bad, immediately evacuate with His Highness. Remember, even if you lose your lives, you must ensure His Highness's safety. Military orders must be obeyed. A soldier's duty was to obey orders. Whether it was in ancient times or modern times, it was always so. Guijian and Wang Tong both understood that the reason Dugu Exayan had risked his life to fight the assassins outside was to ensure Li Tai's safety. If they went to rescue Dugu Exayan now, not only would they fail to save Dugu Exayan, they would also fail to live up to Dugu Exayan's loyalty. Therefore, after a brief moment of hesitation and struggle, the 2 of them finally chose to carry out their orders and protect Li Tai as he safely evacuated from the post house. Before Dugu Xen had left, he had said that if the situation was bad, they were to immediately evacuate with Li Tai. Dugu Xian's painful and mournful roar meant that the situation was not good. It was very likely that the other party had already heavily injured Dugu Xian. If Dugu Xen, the top fighter of the Imperial Guard, was heavily injured, then it was only a matter of time before the rest of the Imperial Guard were defeated. The situation is not good. Inside the room, Li Tai abruptly stood up when he heard this. He looked at Guo Jian and Wang Tong and asked with a frown, "That loud roar just now, was it General Dugu?" A trace of pain flashed across Guo Jian and Wang Tong's faces. Soon after, Guo Jian cupped his fists and replied, It's the generals. There must be a peerless expert among them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to injure the general. Therefore, Your Highness, please follow us and retreat immediately." What? Li Tai was both shocked and furious when he received confirmation from the two of them. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly thought of something and shook his head. "No, I can't retreat like this." After saying that, Li Tai looked at Iron Egg beside him and said, "Iron Egg, don't we still have communication fireworks? Quickly take the communication fireworks to the roof and light them up. General Fei Ying and the others will definitely come to the post house's rescue when they see it." The teachers and students of Yanhuang College came to Taiyuan mainly to build a telegraph relay station. During the process, the teachers and students of the college couldn't stay together forever. After all, if they wanted to build a telegraph relay station as soon as possible, they had to work together. In order to prevent accidents from happening during the mission, Dugu Xian had given all the teachers and students of the college a communication fireworks before entering the city. This was to be used to call for help in an emergency. The reason why Li Tai didn't think of using the communication fireworks immediately was that tonight's attack was too sudden. Not only did he not think of it immediately, but Iron Egg and Dugu Xian also didn't think of it. "Your Highness, your body is priceless. How can you put yourself in danger?" Moreover, the general risked his life to fight the assassins despite his injuries in order to protect your safety. If you don't retreat, won't you be letting down the general's loyalty? Wang Tong's eyes were red as he cupped his fist to Li Tai and spoke in a rough voice. Iron Egg couldn't help but advise, "Qingke, Brother Wang is right. We won't be of much help if we stay here. Why don't we retreat first and then go to the provincial governor's mansion to get reinforcements? Otherwise, won't we be wasting General Dugu's efforts?" Li Tai shook his head resolutely. "No, I can't just watch General Dugu and these Imperial Army soldiers throw their lives away without doing anything. Moreover, there are still some teachers and students of our college staying in the post house. How can this prince abandon his teachers and classmates and flee alone?" Li Tai used to be very afraid of death, but after staying in the college for more than a year, the word righteousness had appeared in his mind. Leaving aside the fact that Dugu Xian had dutifully protected them all this time, a month ago, when the Tuju estate preceptor Wu Jie had snuck into the college to steal the secret files, if not for Dugu Xian's timely arrival with his troops, Wu Jie would have very likely massacred the college. If that had happened, the casualties that night would have been even greater, and the losses would have been even greater. Based on this point alone, the college owed Dugu Xian a great favor. Not to mention, Dugu Xian himself had a very close personal relationship with Li Zixuan, the young macho of Yanhuang College. Therefore, although Dugu Xian was only a subject of the House of Li, Li Tai couldn't bear to see him die like this. Iron Egg heard this and couldn't help but fall silent. In fact, how could he bear to see Dugu Xian and the rest of the Imperial Army soldiers die? But in the current situation, they had to make a choice. No matter what, Li Tai couldn't have anything happen to him in Taiyuan City. Otherwise, more people would die because of him. Thinking of this, Iron Egg steeled his heart and quietly took a step back. Then, he prepared to chop Li Tai's back with his hand. Chapter 1952. Just as Li Tai was debating if he should stay behind and fight to the death with the Imperial Army and the Academy, Dugu Xian, who had been heavily injured on the east side of the courier hostel, finally could not hold on any longer. Facing forward, he fell straight to the ground. Dugu Xin felt his consciousness rapidly falling into darkness, and he gradually lost all feeling in his body. The dissipating power did not gather back. This time, a miracle did not happen. Or rather, a miracle had never happened before. The previous time was merely a final burst of consciousness from the dying Dugu Xin due to his strong willpower and conviction. General, when the Imperial army rushing over saw Dugu Xin fall straight from the roof, they could not help but widen their eyes in anger. They quickened their steps, ignoring the Turkic spies chasing after them, and ran even faster in the direction of Dugu Xion's fall. Bam! Fortunately, the Imperial guards managed to catch Dugu Xin before he hit the ground. Unfortunately, the strong collision and impact had caused the two swords in Dugu Xion's back to sink 2 inches deeper into his flesh. General, please wake up. Seeing the man who was usually invincible like a god of war, now covered in blood and barely breathing, the Imperial army's eyes were red with grief. Quick, you guys take the general and retreat first. Leave this to me and the other brothers. A middle-aged man with a round face and short beard, looking very dignified, ordered the Imperial army around Dugu Xin. Yes, Commander Hu, the Imperial army replied. Then, they carefully pulled out the 2 swords on Dugu Xion's back and prepared to leave with Dugu Xion on their backs. Old Hu, don't worry about me. Quick, pull back the defense line and protect His Highness. We must hold on until Fei Ying and the others come back. At this moment, Dugu Xin, who was lying on the back of an Imperial army soldier, spoke with difficulty. His voice was very soft and could easily be drowned out in the chaos of the battlefield. However, the middle-aged man with a round face and short beard happened to be beside him and naturally heard what he said. Quick, everyone, retreat immediately to Iching Pavilion and protect His Highness. The middle-aged general did not immediately reply to Dugu Xion's words. Instead, he shouted at the Imperial army soldiers around him. The Iching Pavilion he mentioned was the name of the main building in the center of the courier station. It was also where Li Tai, Iron Egg, and the others were hiding. Yes, in the Imperial army, Dugu Xion had the highest status, followed by Dugu Feiying. Other than the 2 brothers, this round-faced, short-bearded Hu general had the highest status. Thus, the Imperial army would still respond to his orders. After giving the order, Hu Lang commanded the Imperial army to continue evacuating with Dugu Xin. At the same time, he shouted to Dugu Xin, General, no matter what you say, our brothers will not abandon you. This old whose life was saved by you back then. Even if I have to die, this old who will die before you. We must protect His Highness, and this old who must also save you. Hu Lang straightened his neck, his face filled with stubbornness. Under his lead, Dugu Xin was swiftly brought away from the battlefield. While Xianye's Turkic spies had tried to stop them, they were all cut down by Hu Lang and his Imperial army soldiers. The Imperial army quickly pulled back their defensive line and retreated toward the main building of the courier station. Strangely, Xianye and the others, who had severely injured Dugu Xin, did not intervene during this process. Instead, they stood on the roof and watched coldly. Leader, why don't we pursue and kill Dugu Xin? A Turkic spy asked in confusion. This was indeed the best opportunity to kill Dugu Xin. There's no need. Xianye shook his head and confidently said, Dugu Xin is already dead. Moreover, our goal is about to be achieved. Chapter 1953. Okay, Brother Wang, Brother Gua, take care of yourselves. My master and I will definitely treat you to a drink after this. In the room of the Taiyuan post station, Iron Egg finally looked at Wang Tong and Guijian and said solemnly after a short hesitation and struggle. Although he really wanted to have a big fight with this master who was at the peak of the chi-forming realm in front of him, because only through a real life and death battle could his martial arts improve faster. Just like when he fought against Ming Huan in Guan City. Not long after that battle, he broke through to the Qi-forming realm. However, Iron Egg knew very well that this was not the time for him to show off his bravery. Protecting Li Tai's safety was the most important task at the moment. He had to make a choice. Good. To be treated to a drink by Marquis, I, Wang Tong, have not lived in vain. Brother Iron Egg, I'll remember what you said. I'll remember it too. Hearing this, Wang Tong and Guo Jian laughed heartily and said loudly. However, there was a trace of sadness in their laughter. Obviously, they both knew that if they wanted to successfully protect Li Tai and Iron Egg in front of them, they had to risk their lives. After this battle, there was a high chance that they would lose their lives. And the drink that Iron Egg promised was something they could only drink in their next lives. Humph. You want to leave? None of you can leave tonight. The conversation between Iron Egg, Wang Tong, and Guo Jian naturally fell into the ears of the masked man in black. He sneered and rushed directly toward Li Tai, who was standing at the back. Humph. Are you treating us brothers, as if we don't exist? Seeing this, Wang Tong and Guo Jian both raised their MO swords and slashed at the masked man in black. A trace of contempt flashed in the eyes of the masked man in black. He raised his left sleeve slightly, and 2 flying daggers with cold light flew out from his sleeve. Then, there were 2 ear-piercing sounds of metal colliding. The MO swords in Wang Tong and Guo Jian's hands met the 2 flying daggers of the masked man in black in the air. A huge force passed through the body of the daggers and quickly backfired on the owners of the MO swords. Both of them felt their wrists go numb, and their right hands holding the MO swords were almost shaken loose. This masked man in black was a flying dagger master. Most importantly, the momentum of the 2 MO swords was greatly reduced after passing through this layer of obstruction. On the other hand, the black-clothed man increased his speed and dashed towards Li Tai's position at an even faster speed. Based on Wang Tong and Guo Jian's current speed, it was impossible for them to stop the black-clothed man before he caught Li Tai. I didn't want to fight, but now it seems that I have no choice but to fight. Tai Dan, who was standing by the side, could clearly see that the strength of the black-clothed man was not something that Wang Tong and Guo Jian could handle. Even if the 2 of them fought with their lives on the line, they would not be able to delay the black-clothed man until Li Tai and Tai Dan escaped. Therefore, Iron Egg drew out the long sword at his waist and took the initiative to meet the masked man in black who was rapidly approaching them. This was the second move of the 9 Taishian swords. The masked man in black sneered and changed his direction midway. He decisively abandoned Li Tai and turned to stab at Iron Egg with his sword. It turned out that the previous move was just a cover to lure Iron Egg to take the initiative to make a move. In this way, he could find a flaw in Iron Egg's swordsmanship after Iron Egg hurriedly made a move and kill Iron Egg directly. At this critical moment, Iron Egg's eyes flashed. He raised the long sword he borrowed and changed his swordsmanship midway. His sword was like a magnet, firmly sucking Ming Huan's long sword. His whole body leaned back, forming a small angle with the ground. The 38th move of the Taiji swordsmanship, Phoenix Wings spread. Iron Egg's wrist moved slightly and twirled the sword twice. The masked man's long sword strength was immediately deflected by Iron Egg, sacrificing oneself to follow others, failing to lead in, pulling out 1,000 pounds with 4 tails. Chapter 1954. Hehe, I'm sorry. With your insignificant strength, I can defeat you fair and square. But this is a serious matter. Lord Guard will not allow any mistakes. Besides, I'm in a hurry. In the guest room of the I Ching Pavilion in the Taiyuan Courier Station, the black-clothed, masked man sneered. He retreated to the door and opened it. He reached out and took out a lit incense stick. After closing the door, the black-clothed masked man returned to the room. Seeing Iron Egg's puzzled expression, the black-clothed masked man explained. This is called soul-breaking incense. It has a very light smell and is difficult to detect. Those who are poisoned by this incense will be poisoned in a quarter of an hour. When the poison takes effect, your body will be as soft as cotton, and you will lose all your inner strength. Now, you are all lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Poof! As he spoke, the black-clothed masked man first broke the half-burnt incense in his hand. Then, he thrust his sword forward and pierced Wharton's heart without missing a beat. With Wharton's current state, he was unable to dodge the black-clothed man's sword, so he could only watch as the long sword pierced his chest. Under the effect of the soul-severing incense, he didn't feel any pain at first, but when the sharp sword was about to touch his heart, he felt a trace of throbbing and intense pain. But in the next moment, all of his consciousness completely dissipated. Just as the masked man had said, at this moment, Tai Dan, Li Tai, Guo Jian, and Wang Tong were like lambs that were waiting to be slaughtered, and the black-clothed masked man was the butcher that held the butcher's knife. When facing this butcher, the lambs could only wait for death and didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Brother Wang, old Wang, seeing that Wang Tong was killed, Iron Egg in Guo Jian's eyes were filled with anger. If looks could kill, the masked man in black would have been cut into countless pieces by their looks. Hey, don't worry, it will be your turn soon. The black-clothed man sneered and pulled out his sword from Wharton's chest. He then turned to look at Guo Jian, who was closer to him. In the face of death, Guo Jian's face showed no signs of fear. He had already stabbed his saber into the ground to support his body. When he saw the black-clothed man walking towards him, he glared angrily at him, his face full of disdain. The men of the Imperial Army do not fear death. All of them were indomitable men. We're not like, you son of a bitch, betraying your own race, betraying your ancestors, and working for the dogs at Turks. If you're alive, there will be countless people poking at your spine. If you're dead, there will be countless people digging up your grave so that you'll never be able to rest in peace. Because of the absolute soul fragrance, Guo Jian was currently very weak. He used his strong willpower to resist the medicinal properties of the absolute soul fragrance, preventing himself from falling unconscious. His voice was very soft, but every word he said was incomparably clear and firm. After all that had happened, most of the Imperial Army soldiers knew that the people who had been stirring up trouble in Source Peak City were probably Turkic spies. Thus, before his death, Guo Jian had been unable to restrain himself from cursing the men in black. "You're courting death." Guo Jian's words had thoroughly enraged the black-clothed man. Eyes wide with rage, the black-clothed man lunged forward and slashed his sword at Guo Jian's neck. Big Brother Guo. A popping sound could be heard as blood splattered everywhere. A head rolled onto the ground, right next to Bruiser's feet. Bruiser staggered backward a couple of paces, his face filled with grief and boundless rage. He couldn't stop himself from trembling, not from fear, but from rage that came from the depths of his heart. Seeing his companions mercilessly slaughtered by the black-clothed man one after another, Iron Egg's rage had reached a boiling point. But this time, anger was of no use. Not only could he not use any of his Jinqi, he also had to focus all his energy on resisting the effects of the absolute soul fragrance to keep himself awake. Without the absolute soul fragrance, even if he knew that he was no match for the black-clothed man, Iron Egg would have charged forward with his sword. Moreover, if it was a one-on-one fight, Iron Egg believed that he had a chance of winning. When Li Zixuan had just returned from Longhu Mountain, he was only at the late stage of qi refining. However, with the 9 Taishan swords and Taiji sword technique, he was able to defeat Snake King, who had been in the Grandmaster realm for many years. As a personal disciple of Li Zixuan, Iron Egg believed that with his understanding of these 2 sword techniques, he still had a chance to fight the black-clothed man head-on. Because the 9 Taishan swords and Taiji sword technique were supreme sword techniques that could allow one to surpass the level of an enemy. Moreover, these 2 sword techniques, one for offense and one for defense, could achieve unexpected results if used skillfully. Unfortunately, there were not so many ifs in this world. The absolute soul fragrance that the black-clothed man had lit before entering the room had already strangled all the ifs and uncertainties in the cradle. There was no suspense in this battle at this point. Humph! Little guy, it's your turn next. After killing Guo Jian, the black-clothed man glanced at Iron Egg and then walked towards Iron Egg with his sword. Chapter 1955. Stop! In the room, although these two words were said very softly, they clearly reached everyone's ears. At the very beginning, the masked man in black even thought that he had misheard, but not long after, the same voice rang out in the room again. This made him believe that there was indeed someone shouting, "Stop." He quickly became alert and used his eyes to look for suspicious people in the room. This room was not big. Other than him, Iron Egg, and the two fallen Imperial guards, there was only Li Tai in the room. But Li Tai had been poisoned by the soul-breaking incense and should have fainted. After all, he was the only one in the room who did not know martial arts. His resistance to the soul-breaking incense was definitely the weakest. If that was the case, then who was the person who shouted stop? The masked man in black coldly scanned every corner of the room. He even looked at the bodies of the two Imperial guards, but in the end, he found nothing. Finally, the masked man's eyes fell on the innermost corner of the room. Li Tai had been hiding in that corner since the beginning. But the masked man in black could not help but be shocked by what he saw. He saw that Li Tai, who had fainted, actually stood up shakily and strenuously. He faced the masked man in black and Iron Egg with a face full of anxiety and anger. Obviously, he was the one who had shouted stop earlier. In the face of the masked man in black, Li Tai and Iron Egg were both poisoned by the soul-breaking incense and had no ability to resist. Under such circumstances, would Li Tai's stop really work? Obviously not. A hint of a smile appeared at the corner of the black-clothed man's eyes. He said to Li Tai indifferently, "Your Highness, these people are just servants. If you kill them, then kill them. Why are you in such a hurry?" As he spoke, he retracted his gaze, raised his sword, and continued to slash at Bruiser's neck. Stop! In the room, although these two words were said very softly, they were clearly heard by everyone. At the very beginning, the masked man in black even thought that he had misheard, but not long after, the same voice rang out in the room again. This made him believe that there was indeed someone shouting stop. He quickly became alert and used his eyes to look for suspicious people in the room. The room was not big. Other than him, Iron Egg, and the two fallen Imperial guards, there was only Li Tai in the room. But Li Tai had been poisoned by the soul-breaking incense and should have fainted. After all, he was the only one in the room who did not know martial arts. His resistance to the soul-breaking incense was definitely the weakest. If that was the case, then who was the person who shouted stop? The man in black coldly scanned every corner of the room. He even examined the bodies of the two Imperial guards, but in the end, he found nothing. Finally, the man in black's eyes fell on the innermost corner of the room. Li Tai had been hiding there from the beginning. Just one look and the man in black could not help but be shocked. He saw that Li Tai, who had been unconscious, actually stood up shakily and strenuously. He faced the man in black and Iron Egg with a face full of anxiety and anger. Obviously, he was the one who had shouted stop earlier. In the face of the man in black, Li Tai and Iron Egg were both poisoned by the soul-breaking incense and had no ability to resist. Under such circumstances, would Li Tai's stop really work? Obviously not. A hint of a smile appeared at the corner of the black-clothed man's eyes. He said to Li Tai indifferently, "Your Highness, these people are just servants. If you kill them, then kill them. Why are you in such a hurry?" As he spoke, he retracted his gaze, raised his sword, and continued to slash at Bruiser's neck. Chapter 1956. The dagger in Li Tai's hand actually had a great history. In the early years of Wuda, the Turks had invaded the borders of the Great Tang on a large scale. At the time, Lier had still been the king of Qin, leading an army to attack the Turks from the north. He had won one battle after another, and after killing the leader of one of the tribes, Lier had seized an extremely exquisite dagger. From that moment on, This dagger had been used to cut up many cattle and sheep in his military career. In Li'er's hands, this dagger was used more as a cutlery than as a tool for killing. Later, Li'er gave this dagger, which symbolized victory and glory, to one of his favorite sons, Tai. At that time, Tai was only 4 or 5 years old. He only thought that this dagger was pretty and fun. After the initial novelty, he did not care about it anymore. This time, he followed the teachers and students of the academy to the north to build a telegraph relay station. This was the first time in his life that Tai had traveled so far. Therefore, he also took this dagger that Li'er gave him as a self-defense. However, neither he nor Li'er had expected that this dagger from the Turk tribe would appear in the battle against the Turk spies by pointing at Tai. But no matter what, Tai's action of risking his life for the sake of justice was not a disgrace to the dagger that symbolized victory and glory. Good. Very good. Then I will give Prince Wei face and let this kid go for the time being. In the room, seeing that Tai was really going to threaten him with his life, the man in black did not dare to take the risk. He sneered and moved the long sword away from Iron Egg's head. Just as Tai had said, if they didn't have Tai as a hostage, once the Great Tang government's reinforcements arrived, all of them who had launched a sneak attack on the post house would have died here. Furthermore, even if they managed to evacuate the post house before the Tang Empire's reinforcements arrived, their mission would still be considered a failure if they failed to capture Tai alive. This was because Zhao Diyin might have already fallen into the hands of the Tang Empire's officials. If they failed to capture Tai alive as a hostage, Zhao Diyin's life would be in danger. The dagger in Tai's hand actually had a great history. In the early years of Wuda, the Turks invaded the borders of the Tang Empire. At that time, Li'er, who was still the king of Qin, led an army to attack the Turks from the north. Along the way, he won one battle after another and could be said to be an irresistible force. After killing the leader of a tribe, Li'er seized an extremely exquisite dagger. Since then, Li'er's military career, this dagger had been used to dissect many cattle and sheep. In Li'er's hands, this dagger was more used as a tableware rather than a tool to kill. Later, Li'er bestowed this dagger, which symbolized victory and glory, to one of his favorite sons, Tai. At that time, Tai was only 4 or 5 years old. He only thought that this dagger was pretty and fun. After the initial novelty, he did not pay attention to it anymore. This time, he accompanied the teachers and students of the academy to the north to build a telegraph relay station. This was the first time that Tai had traveled so far in his life. Therefore, he also took this dagger that Li'er had bestowed upon him as a self-defense. However, neither he nor Li'er had expected that this dagger from the Turks would appear in the battle against the Turk spies by pointing at Tai himself. But no matter what, Tai's act of risking his life to fight for justice today was not a disgrace to this sword that symbolized victory and glory. Chapter 1957. Silence. Outside Iching Pavilion, the Imperial Army and the Turkic spies had been locked in a fierce battle a moment ago, but with the roar of the man in black, the noisy courtyard instantly fell silent. Both sides turned their gazes to the man in black, and Tai standing in front of him. "Your Highness!" Seeing that the man in black had taken Tai hostage, the Imperial Army was alarmed. Without needing Hu Longjiang's orders, the Imperial Army automatically changed their formation and completely surrounded the man in black and Tai. At this moment, the actions of the man in black and Tai were rather strange. Tai was holding a dagger, but the dagger was pointed at his neck. The man in black had placed his sword on Tai's shoulder, but for some reason, the sword was still some distance away from Tai's neck. At first glance, it seemed like the man in black did not want Tai to die. No matter how one looked at it, it was strange. It was like a robber holding a hostage. The hostage wanted to die, but the robber wanted to protect the hostage. It didn't make sense at all. However, such a thing that defied common sense had really happened. "Protect His Highness." At this moment, Hu Longjiang reacted and shouted loudly. The Imperial army pointed their swords at the man in black who had just come out of Iching Pavilion. As for the Turkic spies behind them, they could no longer care about them. If something happened to Li Tai, their mission in Taiyuan would be considered a complete failure, and none of them would be able to escape Li Er's punishment. However, because the man in black had placed his sword on Li Tai's shoulder, the Imperial army did not dare to make any moves. After all, Li Tai's life was still in the hands of the man in black. Haha, Tianning, you succeeded. At this moment, a thin-masked man flew down from the roof of Iching Pavilion. It was Xian Yi, who had been fighting with Dugu Xian earlier. Xian Yi landed steadily beside the black-clothed man. After glancing at Li Tai, who was standing in front of the black-clothed man, Xian Yi's hanging heart immediately returned to his stomach. He allowed a light breath and smiled faintly. That's right, the black-clothed man who had sneaked into the room to capture Li Tai was Zhao Dian's second-in-command, Tianning. Previously, Xian Yi had led his men to attack the post house from the front, attracting most of the Imperial army to the east side of the post house. Even Dugu Xian, the commander of the Imperial army who had yet to recover from his injuries, had personally left his room to participate in the battle. Thus, there were very few Imperial army soldiers left to protect Li Tai. This gave Sky Eagle a chance to sneak into Iching Pavilion. Seeing Xian Yi fly over, Sky Eagle nodded in greeting before replying. This is all thanks to you and your brothers holding back the majority of the Imperial Army's forces. Let's take King Wei away now and go back to rescue the Gar Master. Xian Yi nodded and said, That's how it should be. At this moment, Sky Eagle coldly said to Li Tai, Your Highness King Wei, it's time for you to fulfill your promise, right? This seat has no intention of harming your life. As long as you get these Imperial Army soldiers to open a path for us to leave, this seat will naturally protect you. Your status is noble, and your body is priceless. You shouldn't be willing to exchange your life for ours, right? In principle, Sky Eagle didn't want Li Tai to die because he needed to use Li Tai as a hostage to rescue Zhao Dian. However, this didn't mean that he didn't dare to kill Li Tai. If Li Tai didn't cooperate with him and instead recklessly ordered the Imperial army to attack the people they had brought with them, Sky Eagle didn't mind dragging Li Tai down with him before he died. After all, he was about to die. He couldn't care less about the mission. All of you, disperse and let them go. Li Tai also understood that he and Sky Eagle were at most in a relationship of checks and balances. Sky Eagle didn't dare to kill him casually, and he didn't want to throw his life away so easily. As long as they didn't completely fall out with each other, they could coexist peacefully. However, once they did, it would be a life and death struggle, and both sides would suffer great losses. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Li Tai finally gave the order. Chapter 1958. Wow, Father, when did you buy such a big manor? Near Dragon Mountain, after passing through several hills and woods, Wang Kuei, Wang Hong, Wang Xinyuan, and the others saw a vast and huge manor in the wilderness. The manor covered an area of at least a dozen acres. At this time, the sky was dark, and the interior of the manor was lit with candles, stone lamps, and bonfires. Under the illumination of these lights, they could vaguely see the outline of the manor. At this time, Wang Hong's eyes widened, and he couldn't help but exclaim. On the way, Wang Kuei roughly told Wang Hong about the manor's training of a group of assassins, but he didn't go into detail. For example, the size of the manor and the number of assassins, he didn't tell Wang Hong about it. The main reason was that talking to Wang Hong was too infuriating. If he didn't pay attention, he would be angered half to death. Therefore, after seeing this huge manor, although Wang Hong was somewhat prepared, he still couldn't help but be surprised. Yes, master. As soon as Wang Hong's voice fell, two young men in black suddenly jumped down from the trees on both sides of the road. The two men held weapons and landed in front of Wang Kuei and the others. Just as they were about to go forward and ask, one of them recognized Wang Kuei through the light of the torch in front of the crowd. He looked serious and quickly put away his weapon. He stepped forward and saluted Wang Kuei "Greetings, master! Greetings, master!" Another warrior quickly walked over and cupped his fists in salute to Wang Ke. Wang Ke didn't answer Wang Hong's previous question. Instead, he nodded lightly at the two men in front of him and said, "Shangliang, Su Lei, are the two of you on night duty tonight?" "Yes." The two men nodded in response. Wang Ke softly said and then ordered, "Let's go. Enter the manor, and then let White Bear quickly gather everyone in the manor in the martial arts field." "Yes." This subordinate obeys. Hearing Wang Ke's order, the two men felt that something big was about to happen. They quickly saluted, bowed, and took the order. "Wow, father, when did you buy such a big manor?" Near Dragon Mountain, after passing through several hills and woods, Wang Ke, Wang Hong, Wang Xinyuan, and the others saw a luxurious and huge manor in the wilderness. The manor covered an area of at least a dozen acres. At this time, the sky was dark, and the manor was lit with candles, stone lamps, and bonfires. Under the illumination of these lights, they could vaguely see the outline of the manor. At this time, Wang Hong widened his eyes and could not help but exclaim. On the way here, Wang Ke roughly told Wang Hong that the manor had trained a group of assassins, but he didn't go into detail. For example, he didn't tell Wang Hong the size of the manor and the number of assassins. The main reason was that talking to Wang Hong was too infuriating. If he didn't pay attention, he would be angered to death. Therefore, after seeing this huge manor, although Wang Hong was somewhat prepared, he still couldn't help but be shocked. "Yes, master." As soon as Wang Hong's voice fell, two young men in black suddenly jumped down from the trees on both sides of the road. The two of them held weapons and landed in front of Wang Ke and the others. Just as they were about to go forward and ask, one of them recognized Wang Ke through the light of the torch in front of the crowd. He looked solemn and quickly put away his weapon. He stepped forward and saluted Wang Ke. "Greetings, master." Chapter 1959. On the small path outside the mysterious manor, the sound of hooves thundered. Under the leadership of Han Lijing, the imperial army galloped toward Wang Ke's men. Although the path was not wide and could only accommodate 3 war horses side by side, the 200 imperial army soldiers marched in unison with great momentum. The charging formation of 200 men should have the momentum of 1,000 men. Bai Xiong, Qi Zhe, and the others, who were rushing over to spy on the enemy, could not help but turn pale with fright when they saw this momentum. At this moment, they were still 400 to 500 feet away from the imperial army, but Bai Xiong did not hesitate to turn his horse around and shout loudly, "Stop! Soldiers are attacking! Soldiers were coming to attack! Giddy up!" Although White Bear was a martial arts master at the peak of Qi transforming stage, he did not have the courage to fight against such a well-trained cavalry. Even if he was a martial arts master in the Grandmaster realm, he would not dare to fight head-on with such a large cavalry formation, not to mention that he was at the peak of Qi transforming stage. Unless these cavalrymen were all ordinary people who did not know martial arts. But was that possible? Obviously, it wasn't realistic. Therefore, White Bear King did not hesitate to turn around and retreat when he saw this. Qi Zhe and the others beside him naturally did not continue to stay when they saw him retreat. They hurriedly turned their horses around and galloped towards Wang Ke. Soldiers? How could the soldiers have caught up to us so quickly? Wang Ke, who was not far away, couldn't help muttering to himself in confusion after hearing White Bear's loud shout. "Everyone, listen up. Prepare to meet the enemy. For every soldier you kill, you'll be rewarded 100,000 yuan." At this critical moment, even though Wang Ke was puzzled, he could only temporarily suppress the doubts in his heart. He waved his hand at the group of assassins and guards behind him and ordered loudly. At the same time, he, Wang Xinyuan, and Wang Hong quietly turned their horses around and walked towards the back of the group. As the leaders of this team, they naturally couldn't charge at the front. Kill. These people had been recruited by Wang Ke from all over the country and had been willing to work as assassins under Wang Ke for so many years. There were people who recognized money, but not fate. Now that they heard Wang Kuei say that they would be rewarded with 100,000 yuan for every soldier they killed, their eyes all turned red, and they rushed forward with their knives without any regard for their lives. At this moment, they didn't even have time to think about why there were soldiers here. Why would Wang Kai go against the government? Also, once they killed the soldiers, what would happen to them in the future? Of course, not everyone did not think about these problems. Some of the smarter ones had already predicted the current situation when Wang Kuei said on stage that he would lead them to build a career together. There was no war going on in the Great Tang, but Wang Kuei had said that he would lead them to make a name for themselves. In this situation, what else could they make a name for themselves besides rebellion? Although some people had expected this, they had been under Wang Kuei's strict training for a long time. They had long lost the concept of a country. Although they were a little surprised at first, they did not reject the idea of rebellion. After all, they were all from poor families. None of them wanted to return to the past and continue living in poverty. Kill. Chapter 1960. Escape? Without these assassins and guards, what's the use even if we escape? This is the family property that I have accumulated for more than 10 years. On the path outside, the mysterious manor, after hearing Wang Xinyuan's words, Wang Kuei's face couldn't help but show a trace of bitterness. He sighed and said with tears in his old eyes, only the heavens knew how much effort and price he had paid to secretly cultivate this group of assassins behind the back of his family. Now that he had seen these assassins die one by one under the blades of the imperial army, the old man's heart could be said to be dripping blood. This was because these assassins were the assets he had painstakingly accumulated over the years. They were also the capital he had to make a comeback in the future. He escaped from the Wang family tonight. The reason why he chose to come here first was that he wanted to take these assassins to join Zhao Dian. With these assassins and the money he carried, he had the capital to cooperate with Zhao Dian. However, things did not go as he wished. The assassins that he had cultivated for many years were likely to all die here tonight. How could Wang Kuei be willing to accept this? Grandfather, we can spend money to find people if they are gone, but nothing must happen to you. Once we fall into the hands of the government, there is only a dead end. There will be no more hope. Let's escape quickly. Seeing that Wang Kuei was still sighing sadly, Wang Xinyuan couldn't help but urge him. Wang Hong also hurriedly said at this time, yes. Father, you brought so much money this time. With money, where can't we find masters in the martial arts world? If these people are gone, then they are gone. Right now, it's more important to escape. Your son is only 32 this year. I haven't lived enough. I don't want to die so young. This guy, it was fine if he didn't open his mouth. Once he opened his mouth, he could anger people half to death. Wang Kuei was so angry that he almost couldn't catch his breath. The old man stroked his chest and glared angrily, raising his hand to hit his disappointing son. Wang Hong, however, had the foresight. Before Wang Kuei raised his hand, he had already run away. Father, there's no time to lose. Your son will go to the front to help you open the way. You and Xin Yuan quickly follow. Wang Hong naturally didn't run toward the Imperial Guards. He ran toward the hill on the left side of the road. Before this guy ran away, he didn't forget to tell Wang Kuei, You evil creature. Wang Kuei was so angry that he almost vomited blood, but he had already calmed down. He knew that the wisest choice at this moment was to follow Wang Xinyuan's advice and escape from the forest on both sides before his men were completely defeated. Therefore, he turned around and shouted to the guards not far away, White Bear, Chise, quick! Retreat! Yes! Soon, under the escort of several guards and killers, Wang Kuei and Wang Xinyuan successfully climbed up the hill. After meeting up with Wang Hong on the hill, they went into the dense forest. Not only were the hills on both sides of the road overgrown with weeds, the trees were also dense. Coupled with the fact that it was dark at night, it would be difficult for the Imperial Guards to find them if they were to sneak in like this. In the field, Han Lijing also noticed the abnormality here. He could vaguely see a few figures darting into the forest beside the road. He knew something was wrong and quickly shouted, "Someone is escaping! Who? I'll leave this place to you. I'll go after them." After saying that, without waiting for Zhao Eru's agreement, Han Lijing jumped up the hill on the left side of the road. At the same time, he put the Modeo back on his waist and took the bow and arrow from his back. After that, he knocked the arrow and shot 3 arrows in a row in the direction of the footsteps in the forest. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The sky was dark and the forest was dense. Han Lijing didn't care whether the 3 arrows hit their targets or not. He ran in the direction of Wang Kuei and others while continuing to shoot arrows into the forest from the quiver. Chapter 1961. I didn't think that the mighty king of Wei would end up as our prisoner. Lord Wei's schemes are as wondrous as combings. On the streets to the north of Sourcepeak City, Sky Eagle and Xian Yi were galloping wildly on their horses. Li Tai was riding on the same horse as Xian Yi. Sky Eagle couldn't help but feel heroic as he looked at Li Tai on his horse. Before they came, they actually had a certain degree of suspicion toward Zhao Dian's plan. However, due to Zhao Dian's usual prestige, even if they had doubts in their hearts, they had to carry out Zhao Dian's plan. But now, their measly 100-some people had managed to capture Li Tai from the Imperial Army. Tianning couldn't help but admire Zhao Dian's plans. Xian Yi held the reins with one hand while his other hand was on Li Tai's shoulder, preventing the latter from escaping or making any small movements. When he heard this, he nodded in deep agreement and said, "Lord Guard's wisdom is indeed something that we are unable to fathom. However, Lord Guard's current situation is probably not good. We have to rush back to the inn as soon as possible and rescue Lord Guard." Tianning nodded and then turned around and shouted to the people behind him, "Everyone, pick up the pace. We must return to the inn in 30 minutes. "Yes." The Turkic spies running behind Xian Yi and Tianning loudly replied. They had run here when they came, so naturally they had to run back when they went back. As for the war horses Xian Yi and Tianning were riding, they had taken 2 from the Imperial Army during the chaos when they left the relay station. The situation had been so urgent that they hadn't had time to find more war horses, so only Xian Yi and Tianning had been able to ride back. An inn? These Turkic spies are actually hiding in an inn? I just don't know which inn they're talking about in the city. Li Tai, who had his shoulder pressed down by Xian Yi, could not move at all. He could not help but ponder to himself after hearing the conversation between Xian Yi and Sky Eagle. From the moment he was captured until now, Li Tai hadn't cried out for help because he didn't think it was necessary. In this situation, there was no one in Sourcepeak City who could save him from Xian Yi. Crying out for help would only be a waste of energy. He still needed to save his energy until he reached the lair of the Turkic spies and then find a chance to escape. They had run here when they came, so naturally, they had to run back when they went back. As for the war horses Xian Yi and Tianning were riding, they had taken 2 from the Imperial Army when they were leaving the relay station. The situation had been so urgent that they hadn't had time to find more war horses, so only Xian Yi and Tianning had been able to ride them back. An inn? These Turkic spies are actually hiding in an inn? I just don't know which inn they're talking about in the city. Li Tai, who had his shoulder pressed down by Xian Yi, could not move at all. He could not help but ponder to himself after hearing the conversation between Xian Yi and Sky Eagle. From the moment he was captured until now, Li Tai hadn't cried out for help because he didn't think it was necessary. In this situation, there was no one in Sourcepeak City who could save him from Xian Yi. Crying out for help would only be a waste of energy. He still needed to save his energy until he reached the lair of the Turkic spies and then find a chance to escape. Chapter 1962. Your Highness. This cry of Your Highness was tinged with shock. It was clear that the speaker had never imagined that he would run into Li Tai here. Looking in the direction of the voice, Li Tai was shocked when he saw the appearance of the leading knight. His eyes widened as he said with a face full of surprise, "Generally, why are you in Taiyuan City?" This was none other than Li Junxian. After capturing Zhao Dian at Tongfu Inn, they had joined forces with Wang Chengwu and his 100-some Wang clan shadow guards to escort Zhao Dian to the Bing Province governor's residence. The Bing Province governor's residence and Taiyuan courier station were both to the north of Taiyuan City, so Xianyi and Li Junxian's forces had run into each other. "What? It's His Highness?" Behind Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu couldn't help but be alarmed by their conversation. He hurriedly urged his horse forward and carefully looked. As expected, Li Tai was seated on the horse at the very front. He was both shocked and furious. Thus, Wang Chengwu unsheathed his saber and shouted at Xianyi and the others, "Li Tai, you're the first prince of the Tang Dynasty. Which scoundrel dares to kidnap His Highness? If you know what's good for you, immediately release His Highness and dismount. Otherwise die." Although Wang Chengwu had fought with Xianyi during the day, the light in the night was poor. Moreover, Xianyi's men were all dressed in black and had their faces covered. Without fighting, it was very difficult to identify them. "Otherwise die." The moment these words were spoken, the Wang clan shadow guards behind Wang Chengwu and the Tinsum cavalry led by Li Junxian unsheathed their weapons and began to confront Xianyi's men. "Ha! Commander Wang? Commander Wang, I hope you've been well since we last met." Wang Chengwu didn't recognize Xianyi, but Xianyi recognized Wang Chengwu. Xianyi couldn't help but feel happy. He immediately took 2 steps forward and looked at Wang Chengwu with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Your Highness?" This Your Highness was filled with great surprise. Clearly, the person who spoke had never expected to meet Li Tai here. Looking in the direction of the voice, Li Tai was shocked when he saw the face of the leading knight. He widened his eyes and said in surprise, "Generally, why are you in Taiyuan City?" It was none other than Li Junxian. After capturing Zhao Dian at Tongfu Inn, they had joined up with Wang Chengwu's 100-some Wang clan hidden guards to escort Zhao Dian to the Bing Province governor's residence. The Bing Province governor's residence and Taiyuan courier station were both to the north of Taiyuan City, so Xianyi and Li Junxian's forces had met halfway. "What? It's Your Highness?" Behind Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu couldn't help but be alarmed by their conversation. He hurriedly urged his horse forward and carefully looked. As expected, Li Tai was seated on the horse at the very front. He was both shocked and furious. Thus, Wang Chengwu unsheathed his saber and shouted at Xianyi and the others, "Li Tai, you're the first prince of the Tang Dynasty. Which scoundrel dares to kidnap His Highness? If you know what's good for you, immediately release His Highness and dismount. Otherwise die." Although Wang Chengwu had fought with Xianyi during the day, the light in the night was not good. Moreover, Xianyi's men were all wearing black robes and had their faces covered. Without fighting, it was very difficult to tell who they were. "Otherwise die." The moment these words were spoken, the Wang clan hidden guards behind Wang Chengwu and the Tinsum cavalry led by Li Junxian unsheathed their weapons and began to confront Xianyi's men. "Ha! Commander Wang? Commander Wang, I hope you've been well since we last met." Wang Chengwu didn't recognize Xianyi, but Xianyi recognized Wang Chengwu. Xianyi couldn't help but feel happy. He immediately took 2 steps forward and looked at Wang Chengwu with a smile that wasn't a smile. Chapter 1963. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. Everything was done by my father and Wang Xinyuan. It has nothing to do with me. In a forest outside the mysterious manor, Wang Hong collapsed to the ground after being shot by an arrow in his thigh. Through the light from the torches scattered on the ground and the torches in the hands of the burly man in front of him, Wang Hong saw that the burly man in front of him was covered in blood. The knife in his hand was still dripping with blood. He looked like a killing god from hell. Wang Hong was so scared that he almost peed on the spot. At this time, he couldn't care about the pain in his thigh. He quickly cupped his hands and begged for mercy to the burly man in front of him. "Your father? You're Wang Kuei's son?" This burly man was naturally Han Lijing. As for the blood on his body, It was all the blood of the enemies he had fought before. He himself was not injured. Before this, although Han Lijing had never seen Wang Kuei, Wang Hong looked only in his 30s. He definitely couldn't be the rumored second elder of the Wang family. Therefore, after hearing Wang Hong beg for mercy, Han Lijing had this guess. Yes, but what my father did has nothing to do with me. I'm innocent. Wang Hong first nodded and admitted. Then, he quickly waved his hand and distanced himself from Wang Kuei. While they were talking, there was a rush of footsteps not far away. Then, a group of people holding torches came over. It was the Imperial Guards represented by Zhao Eru. Master Han, all the remaining killers under Wang Kuei have been eliminated, but Wang Kuei is nowhere to be found. Zhao Eru came to Han Lijing, cupped his hands, and said, Han Lijing nodded. He pointed to Wang Hong on the ground and said to Zhao Eru, Wang Kuei has escaped in advance. This is Wang Kuei's son. Take it back first. Hearing Han Lijing say that Wang Kuei had escaped, Zhao Eru frowned slightly, but he still cupped his hands and said, yes. After saying that, he waved his hand behind him. 2 Imperial Guards immediately came forward and lifted Wang Hong from the ground. Just as they were about to take him away, Han Lijing seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He quickly said, wait. The 2 Imperial Army soldiers subconsciously stopped in their tracks. They saw Han Li appear in front of Wang Hong in a flash. He looked at Wang Hong and asked in a deep voice, let me ask you, before this, did anyone come over to inform you of the situation? They say that the Imperial Army is coming here to encircle and annihilate you? Hearing Han Lijing's question for no reason, Wang Hong shook his head blankly and said, no. Who's going to tip us off? What? No. How is this possible? Hearing this, Han Lijing's expression changed slightly, as if he had thought of something terrifying. He was stunned on the spot. Zhao Eru and the other members of the Imperial Army, including Wang Hong, were confused. After a moment of silence, Zhao Eru asked tentatively, Master Han, do you want me to bring people to chase after Wang Kuei? Zhao Eru knew a little about the situation of Zhao Dian and the other Turkic spies. According to what he knew, Wang Kuei was the key person in finding Zhao Dian's hiding place. The main purpose of the Imperial Army coming here this time was to capture Wang Kuei. Hearing this, Han Lijing immediately came to his senses and said anxiously, no, you can't chase after Wang Kuei, quick. Return to the post house quickly. His Highness might be in danger. What? His Highness is in danger? Zhao Eru couldn't help but be shocked when he heard this. He quickly asked, Master Han, what do you mean by that? Han Lijing didn't have time to explain to him at this time. He waved his hand and called for the rest of the Imperial Army to take Wang Hong away. He said, there's no time to explain now. Brother Eru, leave a few of your men here to clean up the battlefield, and the rest of you follow me back to the post house immediately. The faster the better. Seeing that Han Lijing's expression was serious and didn't seem to be joking, Zhao Eru didn't dare to be careless. He quickly replied, okay, this general will make the arrangements right away. After a while, except for 7 or 8 Imperial Army soldiers who stayed to clean up the battlefield, the rest of the Imperial Army soldiers who were not injured or only slightly injured got on their horses under the leadership of Han Lijing and Zhao Eru and rushed toward the post house in Taiyuan City. The team of more than 100 people was like a fire dragon. They first flitted through the small paths near Longshan and quickly arrived at the main road in the city. Master Han, what do you mean by what you said just now? Zhao Eru and Han Lijing were walking side by side. At this time, he finally had the chance to get to the bottom of things with Han Lijing. Hiya! Han Lijing controlled his horse and answered without turning his head. Previously, General Dugu arranged for us to spy on Wang Kuei's secret manor near Longshan in the prison of the post house. The entire plan was overheard by a man in black on the roof beam. According to General Dugu, this man in black is very likely an expert under Zhao Dian's command. After Zhao Dian learned of our plan, it's very likely that he will be one step ahead of us and go to Wang Kuei's manor to inform him. On our side, after General Dugu gave the order It will take time to mobilize the troops, and it will also take a lot of time for the army to arrive at the manor. Zhao Dian will definitely have the opportunity to send someone to inform Wang Kuei in advance before we arrive at the manor. However, when I asked the Wang family boy just now, he said that no one had informed him before we arrived. This means that both General Dugu and I have misunderstood. Zhao Dian never thought of informing Wang Kuei from the beginning to the end. To him, Wang Kuei is just an abandoned pawn. Tonight, he will very likely take advantage of the time when we go to Wang Kuei's manor and the rear is empty to launch a sneak attack on the post house. What? Zhao Dian and the others might launch a sneak attack on the post house? After listening to Han Lijing's analysis, Zhao Eru's eyes widened. A thick layer of fear and uneasiness quickly covered his face. Zhao Eru took 2 deep breaths and said anxiously, "This matter should not be delayed. Why don't you let me choose a group of light cavalry and hurry back to the post house? Nothing must happen to His Highness." In a place like the city where the terrain was not open, the marching speed of a group of 100 cavalry was definitely not as fast as that of a group of 10 cavalry. Therefore, Zhao Eru wanted to choose another small group of people to go back to the post house first. Han Lijing was also a veteran who had been on the battlefield and obviously understood this point. He nodded and said, "This old man will also go with you. I hope everything is not too late." The distance from the post house to Wang Kuei's manor near Longshan was actually not close. Even if they rode fast horses, it would take a long time to make the trip. Not to mention that the Imperial Guards had also spent a lot of time fighting with Wang Kuei's killers outside the mysterious manor. Han Lijing now had a very bad premonition in his heart. It was very likely that something had happened at the post house. Chapter 1964. Wang Clan Ancestral Home, Main Hall. Wang Bing, Wang Yu, Princess Tang, and in the Wang clan's 3rd, 4th, and 5th elders were all gathered in the main hall. Usually, they would have returned to their rooms to rest, but today, Wang Kuei's sudden escape had brought the entire Wang clan to the brink of death. The slightest carelessness could plunge the Wang clan into eternal damnation. Thus, all the core members of the Wang clan, including Wang Bing, were waiting in the main hall for news from Wang Qingwu. The atmosphere in the main hall was extremely oppressive. The maids and servants, standing to the side, didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. At this moment, a middle-aged steward walked in and whispered into Wang Yu's ear, "Master, the people we sent to Tongfu Inn have returned." "Oh, let Qingwu in." Wang Yu, who had been faintly fatigued, was jolted awake. He hastily sat up straight and said to the steward. His voice was rather loud, such that everyone in the main hall heard him. Wang Bing, Princess Tang, and the other 3 Wang clan elders all turned their gazes in Wang Yu's direction. The steward had an awkward expression on his face. He first clasped his hands towards everyone in the room, then said, "My apologies." Commander Wang did not return. Only half of the people who went came back. Only half came back. What's going on? Could Wang Qingwu have been ambushed at Tongfu Inn? Wang Yu frowned and asked subconsciously. He knew that Wang Qingwu had brought over 200 of the Wang family's hidden guards to investigate the situation at the Tongfu Inn, but only half of them had returned. This meant that it was very likely that the other half had encountered some mishap. For over 100 Wang family's hidden guards to encounter mishap, it could only mean that a powerful force had set up an ambush for Wang Qingwu in the inn. The steward hurriedly shook his head. "No, that's not it." The mission this time went very smoothly. Commander Wang took the other half of the people to carry out another mission. I heard from the people who came back that they had a pleasant surprise and captured an extraordinary person. "Oh, captured an extraordinary person? Quick, have someone come in and tell me what's going on." Hearing this, Wang Yu's eyes brightened. The worry on his face disappeared and was replaced with joy. Not only him, but the rest of the people in the main hall also secretly heaved a sigh of relief after hearing the old butler's words. "Yes, master," the old housekeeper responded and then walked to the door. He opened the door and shouted outside, "Wang Quan, come in." Yes. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone in the room heard the sound of hurried footsteps that were getting closer and closer. Soon, an ordinary-looking young man in a tight suit walked in. He clasped his fists and bowed to everyone in the room. "Greetings, family head, princess, grand elder, and third elder. At this time, there's no need to be so courteous. Quickly tell me who you caught at Tongfu Inn." Before Wang Quan could finish his greeting, Wang Bing, who was sitting at the head of the table, waved his hand impatiently, interrupting him. "Yes, Grand Elder." Wang Quan bowed as he received his orders, and then he didn't waste his breath and directly started narrating. "An hour ago, Commander Wang led us to surround Tongfu Inn. We originally intended to capture the manager and owner of the inn, yet we never imagined that we would actually encounter two groups of people in battle there. Chapter 1965. Commander Wang. And this generally, if you don't open a path, then don't blame the sword for having no eyes. On the streets to the north of Taiyuan City, Xianye's men were locked in a tense standoff with the men led by Li Junxian and Wang Chengwu. After hearing Zhao Dian's words, Xianye clenched his teeth, a vicious light in his eyes. He pushed his dagger a little deeper into Li Tai's neck as he spoke to Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian. Just as Zhao Dian had said, as long as Li Tai was in his hands, Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian wouldn't dare to do anything to Zhao Dian. To Xianye, being able to directly save Zhao Dian in this situation was the best outcome. After all, Zhao Dian was their leader. If Zhao Dian couldn't return to the grasslands safely, then only death would await them. But it was clear that they couldn't win against more than 100 people, and this wasn't even considering the fact that Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian were two Grandmaster experts. Whether it was one-on-one or in a group battle, they were no match for them. Thus, Xianye could only act shamelessly and use Li Tai's life to threaten and hold down Wang Chengwu and the others. "You dare!" Wang Chengwu was furious when he saw this. He raised the saber in his hand and pointed it at Xianye. Saber intent suffused the air, and a shapeless gust of saber wind directly slashed apart the air between Wang Chengwu and Xianye. Fortunately, there was no one standing in front of Xianye. Otherwise, this gust of saber energy would have been able to heavily injure them. Xianye's brow creased. He hadn't expected Wang Chengwu to attack him in this situation. Did Wang Chengwu not care about Li Tai's life? At this critical moment, he didn't have time to think. He hurriedly raised his true chi, tapped his feet lightly, and dodged to the side with Li Tai. "You!" Xianye was just about to say something when his voice abruptly stopped. Because the saber aura that Wang Chengwu had just sent out had stopped abruptly when it was about to approach the position where he and Li Tai were standing. It was clear that Wang Chengwu's saber intent had been extremely restrained. He had no intention of harming Xianye, retracting and releasing at will. Wang Chengwu's control over saber intent actually reached the level of freely withdrawing and releasing. Humiliation. Xianye felt humiliated. He recalled his actions just now. He was like a clown, being toyed with by Wang Chengwu. "Do you really think I don't dare to kill him?" A cold glint flashed across Xianye's eyes. He tightened his grip on the dagger in his hand and shouted angrily at Wang Chengwu. Wang Chengwu looked at Xianye with a mocking expression, pretending to be relaxed as he said, "If you really dared to make a move, you wouldn't have taken His Highness out of the way just now." "You!" Xianye was furious, but he was rendered speechless by Wang Chengwu's words. "Commander Wang, General Li, don't worry about me. As a prince of the Great Tang, I will never lower my head to a Turkic spy." Li Tai felt a slight pain on his neck, but he didn't cry out in pain. The children of the royal family matured early. Moreover, after studying under Li Zishuan for more than a year, his mind had matured a lot. Li Tai knew very well that the weaker he appeared now, the more savage his enemy would be, and the more disadvantageous the situation would be for him. Thus, he followed Wang Chengwu's words and shouted loudly. Chapter 1966. On the northern streets of Taiyuan City, Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian had failed to take back Li Tai from Xianyi, and the two sides were once more in a stalemate. However, Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian's actions had thoroughly infuriated Xianyi. Xianyi had grabbed Li Tai by the neck and lifted Li Tai off the ground. His face was red, and he was having trouble breathing. It was clear that he wouldn't be able to last for much longer. The situation was extremely dire. Perhaps just a moment ago, Xianyi didn't have any intention of taking Li Tai's life. After all, in this current situation, Li Tai could be said to be their protective talisman. If Li Tai died, not only would Zhao Diyan die, but they would also be unable to leave Sourcepeak City. But now, after witnessing Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian's speed, Xianyi truly did want to take Li Tai down with him. He understood that if he didn't act decisively in the face of two top-class experts like Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian, the two of them might seize the chance. At that time, not only would Li Tai be rescued, they would all die. Gallop! Gallop! At this moment, a flurry of hooves came from the northwest. From the sound of it, there were quite a few people coming. Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian couldn't help but frown. Could it be the other Turkic spies in the city coming to reinforce Xianyi? Xianyi's expression changed, and he looked towards the northwest with vigilance. He knew that other than the people by his side, the only people left in the city were those who were captured by Wang Chengwu with Zhao Diyan. The cavalry that suddenly appeared in the northwest was definitely not one of them. Whoosh! Very quickly, a large army passed through the corner of the street and appeared on the street. When they saw the dense number of torches here, they quickly rushed over. In the blink of an eye, they had already arrived behind Xianyi's group. Who goes there? 10 meters away from Xianyi's group, the army stopped. The leader of the army looked over and loudly shouted, "Yes, Your Highness!" Under the illumination of the torches, a young man beside the general took a closer look and saw Li Tai, who was being held in the air by Xianyi, desperately trying to pry Xianyi's large hands away. The young man's face was filled with shock, and he immediately roared, "Who are you, scoundrel? Quickly release His Highness." Li Tai was being held up in the air by Xianyi with one hand. From his angle, he could see the army coming from the north, as well as the two generals at the front of the army. He slapped Xianyi's arm and hand with all his strength as he said with difficulty, "Fong, Adjunct, General, Fei Ying." The newcomers were none other than Fong Gongteng from the Bing Province Barracks and Dugu Feiying, who had gone to the Bing Province Barracks to get reinforcements. On the streets to the north of Taiyuan City, Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian had failed to take back Li Tai from Xianyi, and the two sides were once more in a stalemate. However, Wang Chengwu and Li Junxian's actions had thoroughly infuriated Xianyi. At this moment, Xianyi had grabbed Li Tai by the neck and lifted Li Tai off the ground. His face was red, and he was having trouble breathing. It was clear that he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Chapter 1967. To all of you, if you harm His Highness, the only path left for you is death. But if you release His Highness, this general guarantees that I will personally plead with His Majesty for mercy. Perhaps His Majesty will spare your lives on account of the fact that you are not the main culprits. Don't even think that this general will let you go, because if we allow you to take His Highness away, we will find it difficult to escape His Majesty's punishment, and we will all find it difficult to escape death. If we advance, we die, and if we retreat, we die. Thus, if you don't release His Highness, don't even think about leaving this place alive. Dugu Feiying had seen Xianyi threaten Li Tai with Li Junxian's life to make him, Dugu Feiying, and Wang Chengwu open a path. After a few moments of thought, Dugu Feiying firmly refused. But Dugu Feiying was not being unreasonable in his refusal. He still patiently reasoned with Xianyi's group. First, he wanted to make clear his position and situation. In this situation, whether Xianyi snapped Li Tai's neck on the spot or they allowed Xianyi to take Li Tai away, they would have to endure Li Er's thunderous fury. This was why Dugu Feiying had said that if we advance, we die, and if we retreat, we die. Of course, Dugu Feng had another purpose in saying so much, and that was to stall for time and wait for more soldiers to arrive. Dugu Feng and Fong Gongting had only brought a little more than 100 people to this place after seeing the signal fireworks and hearing the sounds of battle. The rest of the Bing province bears were still searching for Wang Kuei's whereabouts, so Dugu Feng wanted to stall for time and wait for more soldiers to arrive so that they could completely surround Xian Yi and the others. In addition, Dugu Feng's words had also cut off the hopes of many Turkic spies. Before this, most of the Turkic spies by Xian Yi's side believed that as long as Li Tai was still in their hands, the authorities would definitely let them leave. However, they had overlooked one problem. Anyone who dared to let them leave with Li Tai would be punished by Lier, and it was very likely that they would not be able to escape death. In this case, their plan to take Li Tai hostage and leave safely would be for naught. A pensive look appeared on Xian Yi's face. It was clear that he also felt that Dugu Feng's words were reasonable. In this situation, both sides were in a deadlock where they would either die if they advanced or retreated. This one does not care if you live or die, but this one can swear on my life that as long as you prevent us from leaving and do not harm our Lord Guard, we will not harm a hair on King of Wei's head. Once we safely leave this place, we will King Emperor Tang. This way, you will be able to report to the Emperor of the Great Tang. General Dugu, what do you think? Otherwise, I'll snap King Wei's neck right now. That way, we'll all be buried together with King Wei. After a few moments of silence, Xian Yi raised his head and shouted at Dugu Feng in the north. Although Dugu Feng had said that if they released Li Tai, he would plead with Lier for mercy, and perhaps Lier would spare their lives because they were not the main culprits, Xian Yi did not want to rely on Dugu Feng's vague promise. He wanted to take back the initiative. This time, it was Dugu Feng's turn to fall silent. His words earlier had been to show that they were in a desperate situation. As the saying went, the unreasonable feared the reckless, and the reckless feared the reckless. People in desperate situations had no scruples, and such people were the most difficult to deal with. Xian Yi's words seemed to be taking a step back and giving Dugu Feng and the others a path to survival. But in reality, this was not the case. After all, who knew how trustworthy Xian Yi's oath on his life was? What if Li Tai met with misfortune in their hands? Who would be able to bear the responsibility for this? A bunch of traitors who betrayed their ancestors. No matter how heavy their oaths are, they can't be trusted. Li Junxian coldly snorted as he mercilessly jeered. At the same time, he made his stance clear. He did not want to release Dugu Fei. Upon hearing Li Junxian's voice, Dugu Feng finally realized Li Junxian's existence. In Chang'an, he had met Li Junxian a few times, but the two of them weren't very familiar with each other. However, he had heard that this mysterious commander of 100 cavalry was extremely skilled in martial arts. In the younger generation, only Li Zixuan could contend against him. With Li Junxian holding down the fort, it was no wonder Xian Yi and the others had been unable to escape. Dugu Feng said to himself, this one has already said what needs to be said. Both of us serve our own masters, so why make things difficult for each other and fight to the death? Xian Yi turned to Li Junxian and chuckled. If General Li doesn't believe me, then there's nothing I can do, but I'll count to 5. If you don't open a path, this one will immediately send His Highness King of Wei on his way. If you don't believe me, you can try. After saying this, Xian Yi shot a glance at the pale and heavily injured Celestial Eagle. Celestial Eagle understood and hastily waved his hand. A group of Turkic spies immediately surrounded Xian Yi. This way, even if Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu, and Dugu Feng launched another sneak attack, these meat shields would give Xian Yi enough time to kill Li Tai. Upon seeing Xian Yi's intentions, Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu, and Dugu Feng grimaced. They understood that Xian Yi was about to get serious. If it didn't get out of the way, Li Tai's fate really did look grim. 1, 2. As Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu, and Dugu Feng hesitated, Xian Yi extended a finger and began to count. All of the Imperial Army soldiers, cavalrymen, and soldiers from the Bing province barracks held their breaths and stared nervously at their leader, waiting for the latter's order. Then they would immediately charge with their weapons in hand. But none of Li Junxian, Wang Chengwu, or Dugu Feng dared to give such an order, because none of them were confident that they could save Li Tai before Xian Yi did. 3, 4, but Xian Yi seemed to have made up his mind, and he began to count faster and faster. Xian Yi was about to reach 5, and his hand was already on Li Tai's head. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, because there was a high chance that Li Tai's neck would be snapped and he would die. Stop! Li Junxian and Dugu Feng both shouted at the same time. Xian Yi raised his head, glanced at Dugu Feng, and then at Li Junxian, and silently waited. Dugu Feng clenched his teeth and finally made a difficult decision. Just when he was about to speak, Li Junxian spoke first. "Release His Highness, and this general will let you leave." Chapter 1968. Release His Highness, and this general will let you leave. Li Junxian's words alarmed everyone. Not only were Wang Chengwu and Dugu Feng alarmed, even the Turkic spies, led by Xian Yi, flabbergasted. No one had expected Li Junxian to agree to let Xian Yi and the others go. One had to know that anyone who dared to give such an order would not have a good ending. Even if Li Tai was saved, Li Er would not show mercy to the one who had given the order. Thus, with these words, Li Junxian was essentially cutting off Li Junxian's future prospects. But just when Xian Yi's hand was about to snap Li Tai's neck, Li Junxian had no choice but to say these words. As the person of the highest status here, he couldn't just let Dugu Feng say these words, could he? Generally, Dugu Feng's face trembled in shock, and he looked at Li Junxian with 30% surprise and 70% gratitude. Just a moment ago, he had been about to say the same thing, but Li Junxian had spoken first. By saying this, Li Junxian had taken the risk for him. In this place, do your words count? Xian Yi's eyes flashed as he quickly recovered from his shock and indifferently asked Li Junxian. In truth, he still didn't know who Li Tai was. All he knew was that Li Tai and Dugu Feng had both called him General Li. Li Junxian coldly and proudly said, "This general is Commander Li Junxian of the Great Tang's 100 Cavalry Division. My words naturally count. Today, this general will let you leave, but I hope that you can keep your promise. If you break your oath, this general will definitely burn Zhao Diyin to the ground." After saying this, Li Junxian threw his sword to the side. Swish! The sword stabbed into the ground an inch in front of Zhao Diyin's feet. Zhao Diyin was just a scholar, and though he was skilled in schemes, he was never as courageous as a martial artist. He was immediately frightened into taking 2 steps back. Commander of the Great Tang's 100 Cavalry Department, Li Junxian, Xian Yi, and the others were startled. They realized that they had nearly kicked a metal plate. If the Imperial Army was an elite force, then the 100 Cavalry was the elite of the elite. The commander of the 100 Cavalry Department was an existence that ordinary people could not hope to reach. How could Xian Yi and the others have imagined that they would encounter the mysterious and incomparably elite cavalry in Source Peak City? Impossible. How could Baichi appear in Source Peak City? Xian Yi subconsciously thought. This was because ever since Zhao Diyin had led them into Source Peak City, they knew the daily happenings in Source Peak City like the back of their hands. It was impossible for them to not have received any news about 100 riders entering the city. Although he didn't quite believe it, Xian Yi could see that Wang Chengwu, Dugu Feng, and the others were completely unperturbed by Li Junxian's report. It was clear that Li Junxian was not lying. Xian Yi knew that this was not the time to delve into Li Junxian's identity. What was important was that he take Li Tai and leave this place as quickly as possible. Okay, since that's the case, General Li, please have your men open a path. This way, this one's previous promise will still stand. Now that he had made his decision, Li Junxian had no reason to hesitate. He waved his hand and ordered, "Everyone, stand to the sides and let them leave." You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.